leave the memories, it gets removed anyways, so
Welcome
we just
back.
get rid of it during this sequence for fun.
Still haven't really
Having
figured
to
out the
sit through
audio
this
thing.
dialogue
Gotta
between
get a
Frosted
good
Flakes and the
headset, I
Courser
think.
is what makes the memory sequence a bit
swap 'em
unbearable.
out.
So
But,
again,
yeah,
there's
just
250
gonna play some games
smackaroos in
here.
it for you if
A
you
little
find a
Duke
way to
Nukem
skip
going. I don't
this
know
with
why.
the parameters I mentioned
Feel
earlier.
like
So we do have access
really
to our
get on
weapons
it.
now because we removed
go back
the
and do
input
Doom.
enable layers, but unlike with
Right?
other NPCs,
Never
shooting
played
these
that start
NPCs
to
doesn't
finish.
skip any
Should
dialogues
probably
for
do
some
that.
reason. In fact, it does
Also, don't
almost
think I've ever
nothing.
completed
Frosted
Carmageddon.
Flakes won't
so-
react at all if we shoot him. He won't even lose
Yeah,
health,
anyways,
and
today
he'll
we're
keep
gonna do
talking
this,
like normal.
and
The Courser, on the other hand, will
have a
aggro
good
to
one.
us
If you
and
have
shoot at
any
us, but we'll
questions
still talk
or
completely
concerns,
normally
make sure you
as
leave
if
me
we
a
aren't
clip.
shooting him. We could
Until
technically
then,
skip some
enjoy.
of the Courser's lines if we down him while he's saying a line, but that only skips the one line and is a pretty minimal time save for the amount of ammo we'd have to use to down him, as well as the risk of losing all our health from the Courser shooting at us. Anyways, if you're interested in maybe looking into things for this section of the run, or just want to see an incredibly in-depth look at all the work we've put into this segment, I have a 30-minute video on my channel detailing everything we've looked into as of this time last year. So, based on the conversation between Frosted Tips and the Courser, we learned that there is no physical entrance to the Institute and we have to teleport in. If you're familiar with the game though, you'll know that's a lie, and there are two physical entrances, but we're not able to use either of them in the speedrun due to how the quests are laid out. In fact, if we were able to use either of the physical entrances, the speedrun would probably be under 20 minutes long. As I just mentioned though, the quests pertaining to those physical entrances and their related triggers are laid out in a way that we aren't able to access those physical entrances without doing a lot more work than we do in the speedrun. So for now, just building the teleporter is a lot faster than trying to get those entrances to be usable. Anyways, once Frosted Tips and the Courser are done talking, we just have to wait a moment and the TV that we interact with to exit the memories becomes accessible. As we're exiting and loading back into the memory den basement, we're going to mash Q to pull up VATS and target Amari so we can quickly shoot her and skip her lines to advance the main quest. We then immediately quick save so we can load warp, and then load the save we made when we were exiting the memory den to set up a punch warp real quick, and then we'll load warp the save we made in the glowing sea outside of Virgil's lab to load warp to there. We're now beginning the stretch building up to building the teleporter now that we're no longer metagaming and our character knows that we need to build a teleporter. Virgil is a super mutant who used to be a human who worked at the Institute, so he knows all the ins and outs and agrees to help us build the teleporter so that we can get him a serum in the Institute that will turn him back into a human. Also, 2 years ago when I made a video explaining the route, I made a joke about how it doesn't make sense that he hides in the glowing sea because it's not like the radiation will really stop the Institute and their synths from getting to him. Several people took issue with this joke, saying that it's actually a good idea because radiation affects robots, and the synths would be affected by the radiation. I would like to counter this point with this the Institute could clearly just send a bunch of Gen 1 and Gen 2 synths to Emperor and Virgil, just like they do when they attack every other thing in the wasteland. I will not back down from this point that the radiation does nothing to protect him. Anyways, from talking with Virgil, we learned that to teleport into the Institute, we need a Courser chip, which lets Coursers teleport from anywhere in the Commonwealth to the Institute. We also learned that there's a Courser somewhere in the Commonwealth right now, and we can follow a radio signal to find its location, but we've played this game once or twice before, so we know that we can just go straight to Green Tech Genetics, which we discovered near the beginning of the run when we punch warped after leaving the vault. Remember that we set up a punch warp when we loaded that save in the memory den as we were leaving? Using that punch warp when we load into Green Tech will bring us right up to the top by an elevator. This is a pretty substantial time save. Was discovered, we used to spend about 30 seconds sprinting and item climbing through the entire building just to get to the elevator, and nowadays getting to the elevator is pretty instant. After we load in and perform the punch warp, we're then going to set up another punch warp. The second punch warp is over, and if I could eliminate one punch warp from existing, it would be that second punch warp. It's a really fun item climb with a box that we used to do in the run that was one of my favorite parts to perform. As we ride the elevator up, we toss out another frag mine in preparation for the final punch warp of Green Tech. Once the elevator doors open up, transitioning us to a new cell, we trigger our punch warp and land on top of a room where we then jump inbounds and converse with the Courser. quick save, load our memory den save to set up another punch warp, and load warp to Diamond City, ready to enter the final stretch of the game, building the teleporter. So the cursor chip, while able to pinpoint the location of the Institute for us to teleport there, is encrypted, so we have to decrypt it first. Luckily, one of our fellow Railroad members, Tinker Tom, is a genius and can do that for us. While our load warping and fast traveling takes forever, I'd just like to say thank you to all of you who continue to support the channel and also apologize for going so long without uploading. I hope that in the meantime, since the last video, you've all been doing well and staying healthy both physically and mentally. The world isn't really in a state that needs to be trying to reach out to those who are close to you and let them know how you value and love them, because it goes a long way to really make someone's day. But also, don't forget to take time to love yourself, because you have value as well. Getting back to the run, after fast traveling to the Railroad HQ, we loot some objects for the components because we're going to be building the teleporter to introduce us to Tom. Just to note, the main components that will use these objects are copper, ceramic, aluminum, and circuitry. Once Des starts walking around as a prelude to introducing us to Tom, we sleep for 1 hour to skip Des walking to her spot, but afterwards, we quickly shoot each of them a few times to skip some of their lines, and then grab an alarm clock for its components as well. When we talked to Desdemona, we aimed at her when we initiated the dialogue, which set up a glitch called a dialogue slide. This is the final glitch of the run that was patched out in later patches, and after we fast travel to the HQ, exit, and enter again to skip some dialogue, we'll trigger the glitch by aiming down sights, which will slingshot us back to where we were standing. This will put us both physically close enough and far enough into the dialogue of Tinker Tom decoding the cursor chip that we can then fast travel back to Virgil's lab to skip the rest of Tom's lines and also get the teleporter plans from Virgil. This fast travel is technically faster to do with the Pip-Boy app, but only if you do it flawlessly, so for the sake of the human element, we just use the in-game Pip-Boy to fast travel. At Virgil's lab, we're going to talk with him again and ensure that we'll totally help him get his serum from the Institute, and totally not forget about him the moment we exit his lab after our talk, and that we'll for sure make sure he turns back into a human. Totally. Now that I think about it, the story of our encounter with Virgil is a bit of an allegory for the adage, if you want something done right, do it yourself. So we've now told Virgil about how we decoded the cursor chip, and he's now handed over some plans for a teleporter so we could head on back to our faction of choice, the Railroad. When we exit the lab, we head back to the HQ where we'll talk with Desdemona and tell her our crackpot plan to teleport into the Institute. At the end of the dialogue, we're going to blast her twice to skip some dialogue. If you haven't noticed already, you can shoot people that you're allied with up to about 4 times and they won't get aimed at us, and it also skips whatever line of dialogue they're saying. After pumping her with lead, we run over to Tom and hand over the plans to him. We mash a bit through his lines, and after he says a certain one that indicates the quest stage updating, we walk away and grab a hot plate, followed by dropping our military grade circuit board we grabbed after talking with Frosted Tips earlier, and we then fast travel to Sanctuary to build the base of our teleporter. The reason why we have to drop the military grade circuit board is that it contains a lot of circuitry, which is a required material for building the base of the teleporter. If we don't drop it, for some reason, the game chooses to scrap the circuit board over scrapping other objects we have that contain circuitry, even though we need the circuit board itself for a later part of the teleporter. After building the base and arriving back at the HQ, we talk with Tom again, who pops up from his sleep because he's just so darn excited to finish the teleporter. Remember earlier when I said if he's sleeping in the good bed, we won't lose any time? If he's sleeping in the good bed, we won't lose any time. Well, this is what I was referring to. Tom popping up from his sleep if he's sleeping in the correct bed. After we received the remainder of the plans from him, we pick back up our military-grade circuit board and fast travel back to Sanctuary to finish off the build. Part of building the teleporter is building all of the actual teleporter components. One small generator and then 5 medium-sized generators, and then connecting it all with wiring. Running out of components in a run is pretty rare, but when connecting everything in this run, I ran out of copper and had to scrap a nearby garage diagnostic cart to get some more to finish connecting everything. After our masterpiece is complete, we then talk with Desdemona to begin the teleportation process. Normally, once you finish talking with Desdemona, moment you step onto the platform and listen to Tinker Tom give a big monologue before teleporting into the Institute. His monologue is super long. Luckily, we can be super rude and fast travel away about a second after stepping on the platform, and if we timed it right, then when we load in, we'll teleport immediately, fully skipping the long speed of time. Before this fast travel strat was found, we would skip the long monologue by making a quick save and load warping, which does the same exact thing as the fast travel, but the fast travel strat is just a few seconds faster. When we teleport into the Institute, we're going to immediately quick save and then throw down a frag mine to punch warp to the lower level of the Institute. Remember, we set this punch warp up when we loaded the memory that save after action checking the Corsair in Greentown. After making a save for load warping later and setting up a punch warp, we quick loaded to go back to when we just loaded into the Institute, where we run up to a nearby terminal and load up the Institute relay targeting sequence that we pickpocketed off of Sturges so long ago. This is the big sequence break in the game, where we're loading an item from the nuclear option quest that we got in the sewer when we're supposed to be exploring the Institute for the first time. This caused Preston to teleport in even though we left him in the Museum of Freedom. There's a lot to why this is happening, but there isn't time to explain, so pause now to read this if you're interested. Preston handed us a fusion pulse charge, and we thanked him by activating our punch warp on him and then entering the door to the Institute Advanced Systems. Here we set up a punch warp and then enter the reactor lab. We can trigger a punch warp and warp to a part of the reactor area, where we then down warp by hitting an invisible plane, which places us right in front of the reactor that we placed the fusion pulse charge on. We then make a quick save and load warp to Diamond City, after which we then fast travel to the Railroad HQ. The load warping and fast traveling here entails a lot of load, so I'd just like to take this moment and say thank you to all of you who continue to support the channel on Patreon. You absolutely don't have to chip into the channel, but you do anyways, and that means more than you know. If you want to support the channel, Patreon is one of the best ways you can, and by chipping in as little as $1 a month, you get access to videos early, updates on videos as they're being made, and the occasional fanfiction writing video. Again, thank you so much for your support, and thank you for being patient with this video coming out. Hopefully the next video doesn't take so long, but knowing me, I'll likely bite off more than I can chew as usual. Back to the run, when we finish loading into the Railroad HQ, Desdemona is going to give a big speech. Big speeches are slow though, and we can skip it by blasting her a few times and aggroing everyone, and then putting away our weapon immediately so they forgive us and we get teleported back to the Institute peacefully. I've lost more record-paced runs than I care to admit because of not putting away my 10mm fast enough and everyone's staying mad at me. When we load into the Institute, we then immediately pull up our Pip-Boy and fast travel back to the Railroad HQ, which for some reason works despite us being indoors having not finished the quest institutionalized. At the Railroad HQ, we set up one final punch warp and talk with Tom real quick to update the quest, and after we say the fire it up line, we can then make a quick save and load warp on the advanced systems door that we made a save in front of earlier. This will bring us back to the Institute because we don't have the fast travel point for it, and it also updates the quest to the final stage where we just have to go to the teleporter room in the Institute and teleport to the Mass Fusion Executive Suite and press a button. After completing the load warp, we'll punch warp out of bounds to COC into the teleporter room, where we then get teleported to the final area of the game, where we'll press a button to finish off the game. The run officially ends when the HUD disappears. Now let you listen to how I reacted to this run on stream when it happened. Oh my god, this is gonna be so fucking close. Oh my god, please don't crash. Please, please, please. Oh my god. Oh, please don't fucking crash. Please, please, please. Oh my god. Oh my god. That's gonna be like a 35, 57 or something. Oh my god, my biceps are twitching, dude. Jesus. Oh my god, it's over! Oh my god!
this nightmare can end! Oh my god.
If you somehow made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for sticking around. This run took me about 2 months of constant grinding to get, and I'm pretty happy with it. It's far from perfect, and if I put more time into it, I'm sure I could lower this record by up to about another 30 seconds, but for right now, I'd like to shift my focus back to making YouTube videos rather than grinding runs myself. If you're interested, I made the saves from this speedrun available for download if you want to play around with them to see what the wasteland is like after the run, or just if you want to run around at 300% speed. Link is in the description. That's about all for this video though. Let me know your thoughts on it by either leaving a comment below or joining my Discord server and leaving feedback there. Link is in the description, and be sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos of speedruns being explained. This was an any % speedrun of Fallout 4. I've been Tomatoiness, and I hope you have an above average day.
The way we were. But now I know. I know I can't go back. I know the world has changed. That the road ahead will be hard. This time, I'm ready. Because I know war. War never changes.
Who wants some? Don't have time to play with myself. Damn, I'm looking good. Where is it?
Hey everyone, my name's Tomatoiness, also known as Don't Capitalize My Name, also known as Churro Pequeño, and this is an any % survival speedrun of Subnautica. This run is performed by Eclipsed, the current world record holder for this category, who also helped me write the script to make sure that I didn't done goof. If you'd prefer to watch either this run without commentary or Eclipse's current world record, they're both linked in the description. Additionally, this is an any % run, so glitches are allowed, but if you prefer to watch a glitchless run, I've linked the current glitchless record by streaming glitches in the description. Never put some we've crash landed on some resources, interacting with wildlife, and building things like tools, bases, and submersibles, with our overall goal being to escape the planet. This run is done on the survival difficulty, which is the game's default mode where we have to manage health, hunger, thirst, and oxygen, and if we die, then we respawn, but with certain items removed from our inventory. In order to complete our overall escape from the planet, we have accomplished, but there's sort of spoilers to just reveal right up front. This may seem antithetical to I try to avoid spoiling games unless it's absolutely necessary to understand what's happening. For these purposes, certain things on our to-do list this run are censored. When we get to the point where we talk about the items, I'll provide a spoiler warning for spoilers for a bit so you can still enjoy the video without having the details of the plot spoiled. There will be visual gameplay spoilers throughout the run though, so you have been warned. With that all being covered, let's get into the...
Hey Chicago guy, I'm home from my safari. Had to swim at the police station. You would not believe the trip
Hey,
I...
Minnesota guy, glad you're home. Try my shake.
Oh, okay.
It's a mix of parsley and beef.
What? Why would you make this? That's fair. Boy, I was really looking forward to trying that. I haven't eaten in months, so it seemed like the perfect thing to time to know.
You should have a midday square then.
Oh, I've heard of these. They're the first functional chocolate bar, right? Made entirely out of ingredients that are raw, vegan, gluten-free, and organic.
Yeah, plus they taste so much better than protein bars and other snack bars, and I never forget.
It's not what we're looking at, right? I want to see those hot takes within there. Wait, so they're a snack food designed to help people cut hunger and cravings between meals, right?
Yep, and there's chocolate and chocolate. Wait, did you fit that whole thing in your mouth? Dude, you're gonna choke.
No, I'm fine.
Oh, okay then. Use code TomatoAnus at checkout to get 15% off your midday squares order.
Wait, what did you say?
Click the link in the description or use code TomatoAnus at checkout to get 15% off your midday squares order.
Oh yeah,
Wait, did you not hear me again? I can just repeat it again. You don't have to pretend like you heard me.
Man, it's good to be home. I love living in Minnesota.
And I love living in Chicago.
And we love living together.
Before starting the run properly, there's a bit more prerequisite info we need to go over. First is that the run is not a now patched version of the game, with the patch being from September 2018. In the game's speedrun history, it used to be more important it's not as important nowadays aside from two things being doable on this patch but not later ones. Secondly, the keybinds that Eclipse uses are a bit different than standard. Subnautica gives you two keys to one action, so Eclipse uses both the left mouse button and scrolling down bound to breaking rocks, and both the right mouse button and scrolling up bound to moving items in inventory and storage screens. This lets him do things like break rocks and pick up items quickly by scrolling to spam inputs, and also spam inputs to interact with multiple things in a single sweep of the camera. The last thing we need to go over before the run is resources and how they're dropped. In short, the speedrun of this game is a lot of resource collection and resource management. There's a total amount of each resource that we need to collect during the run, and we'll be keeping track of how much we have of each resource compared to how much we need. Throughout the run, Eclipse will be collecting resources, crafting things with them, and mentally keeping track of how many of each resource he's collected.
Baby.
Resources are either harvested from deposits of said resource, oftentimes using a tool to do so, or harvested from the planet's flora and fauna. Some resources, though, are available for collection from something called a harvesting node. Harvesting nodes are mineral deposits holding resources that can be broken by the player's hands rather than having to use a tool, and when broken, give you one of several items. The game when you break a harvesting node by way of something called a resource bucket. Think of resource buckets as exactly what they sound like, a bucket that holds resources. Each type of harvesting node has its own resource. Whenever you harvest a node, a resource is drawn from that node's bucket, and that resource is dropped for you. There's a few different kinds of resource buckets harvested in the run, one for every type of harvesting node that we break. As I said a moment ago, the buckets have a chance to be one of several resources. Example, so let's use limestone outcrops first. The way limestone outcrops are set up is for every 2 harvested you get 1 titanium and 1 copper ore. The first time you harvest a 50-50 chance of getting either titanium or copper ore, and whichever one you get, then the next limestone outcrop you harvest, you're guaranteed to get the other. This empties the limestone outcrop bucket, causing it to refill with a new titanium and copper ore. The next time you harvest a limestone outcrop then, it's a 50-50 chance of getting titanium or copper ore, with whatever is chosen then being removed from the bucket until the bucket is emptied and then refilled again. Limestone outcrops are the simple one, with it being just 1 copper ore and 1 titanium for every 2 pulls, but buckets like the sandstone outcrop are a bit more complicated. The sandstone outcrop bucket begins with 2 gold, 3 silver ore, and 3 lead starting in it, making for a total of 8 resources in the bucket. In your first 4 harvests of this bucket, you're guaranteed to get at least 1 silver ore, at least 1 lead, and in the final 4 picks, you're going to the remaining resources in the bucket until the bucket is emptied, at which point it's refilled with the starting combination again. We can get into the run. Eclipse begins by pressing and holding escape to get to the cutscene. You can also skip the intro cutscene with the run officially begins with the first part of your gameplay. It then uses the scroll wheel, replicate navigator, immediate goal is to get at least 1 copper ore, 1 titanium, and 6 acid mushrooms. Right away we grab some nearby metal salvage, which can be turned into 4 titanium, then go into a little cave area to grab acid mushrooms that always spawn here, and break the limestone, which gets us a copper. Had the metal salvage not spawned where it did, we'd have to break this back at our base, we make a battery using 2 acid mushrooms and a copper ore, then convert the metal salvage into 4 titanium. We then use the battery into titanium to make a scanner, and since we got the metal salvage for titanium, we use it to make a standard O2 tank. The standard O2 tank increases our oxygen supply from 45 to 75, but coming up is a stretch where Eclipse will use his oxygen to time out him dying at a specific time. After the O2 tank would screw up that time, so we want to leave our life pod before the tank is finished being made by the fabricator, which you can see Eclipse do as soon as he steps out of the tank. This is him setting up a glitch referred to as remote storage or ghost storage.
I needed that.
For consistency's sake, in this video, we'll just call it ghost storage. So there's a minor delay between when you interact with the life pod storage and the inventory screen pops up. Exiting the life pod in this small window interrupts the animation of our inventory being pulled up, so it's not open. What this does though is the next time that we manually pull up our inventory, we'll be able to remotely access the storage container, letting us deposit or take items from the container. This glitch is used all throughout the setup every time to perform. It's not something you set up once and that you're able to use all the time. Also, something worth noting real quick while we're paused is that typically in this game, the fabricator menu doesn't stay open for the fabricator to make something. Usually the menu stays on until the menu reappears. By holding down the sprint key though, which by default is shift on the keyboard, the menu stays open for us to navigate while the fabricator is fabricating. So once we have ghost storage set up, we make our way to the next point of interest and we swim on the surface. It's 33% faster than swimming underwater. Eclipse is heading to a giant coral tube that he spawned near, which, speaking of, when you start a new game, you spawn on the side of a spawning area in the center of the map. Only about 15 to 20% of the potential spawn area is considered to be good, based on proximity to things on the map like the coral tube, and in this run we spawned as Clip A, which is Eclipse's favorite spawn area for so the coral tube is filled with quartz and limestone, and we need a bunch of those resources for the run, so we're going to collect all of it up in the exact number of items that will be able to fit in our storage container we're about to grab, so 22 million stock. Eclipse makes his way through the coral tube in kind of a spiral to cover as much ground as possible, and in this run he empties out the coral tube with item grab 21, but he knows there's a chance that outcrops spawn on the edge of the tube, and one did here to make for item 22. He had just enough oxygen to make it through the tube into the surface without running out, and after refreshing his oxygen, he dives back down into the kelp forest. This is the oxygen refill that we're going to let run out to time out a death. Here we pick up some metal salvage for a reason that will be more clear later. Just remember to grab some metal salvage in the kelp forest. After grabbing 2 free clusters, Eclipse pulls up his PDA, which activates ghost storage, then deposits the 22 items we got from the coral tube, along with the 2 seed clusters. So our main mode of transportation in the run will be the Sea Glide, but we have to unlock the blueprints. To unlock the blueprints, we have to use our scanner to scan 2 Sea Glide fragments, which spawn somewhat commonly at this wreck just past the kelp forest. The blueprints don't always spawn in one place, so finding them quickly is a pretty good reset point in speedruns. After scanning the fragments, we run out of oxygen and we have 8 seconds to hang out before we die. When you die, you respawn in your last base, which in this case is the life pod, and you use any items on you to last in your base, saving one randomly chosen item and any key story items. After spawning, grabbing the O2 tank from earlier, converting the metal salvage into titanium, and grabbing a ton of items, Eclipse then proceeds to make a series of items which are a battery, copper wire, silicone rubber, 2 glass, lubricant, a survival knife, and the Sea Glide. He then dumps most of his items into storage to make space for new stuff, but keeps tools like the knife and Sea Glide in his inventory and sets up their storage again as he exits the life pod. He'll then be on his way to make a resource gathering loop, namely for quartz and limestone. Eclipse knows that throughout the run he needs to gather a total of 21 quartz and that so far he's gathered 9, so he needs to get 12 resources, and you can never really get too many limestone because of how much copper and titanium we need for the run. In addition to quartz and limestone, he just broke 3 sandstone during this loop, netting him 1 silver, 1 lead, and 1 gold. Outside the cave, he slashes 3 tape coral and 13 he'll need for the run. Then grabs another metal salvage before swimming a short distance and diving down into a crevasse where he'll grab a handful more quartz and limestone. Down here in the crevasse, Eclipse will break 3 additional sandstone, which happen to net him 1 more of each of the potential drops. Just a reminder, sandstone can drop gold, lead, and silver and has a bucket size of 8. Since our first 6 drops from the sandstone bucket were 2 of each possible item, that means that the next 2 sandstone we break will give us 1 lead and 1 silver ore, and the bucket will then reset. Our inventory is getting pretty full at this point, so we activate ghost storage and dump the resources that we can before we start grabbing any resources we come across on our way to exit the cave. Our oxygen supply is running pretty low, but we're close to the life pod and we're holding a ton of resources that we just harvested that we don't want to lose and can't fit into storage, so rather than letting our oxygen run out to spawn back at the life pod, we simply just head back home. Back inside, Eclipse will make a battery, copper wire, a computer chip, a wiring kit, and put it all together to make a habitat, which is one of the last tools we need in the run. It pretty much just lets us build new bases. He'll then turn the metal salvage he grabbed into titanium. Before he exits the life pod with a ghost storage setup, Eclipse makes sure all his glass is in storage and also picks up as much quartz and titanium as he can, while also making sure he has a bit of copper too. When he's outside the life pod, he starts making his way to a specific location where he's going to build a base. Depending on where you spawn in the speedrun, there are different locations where you want to build your base, all with the goal of time later in the run. When Eclipse goes to place the base, he'll race to place his face in the space between 2 shiitakes. Fuck, that didn't run like I thought it would. So once he's in position to place the base, Eclipse will aim up and slightly above this coral shell plate right here. This lines up his camera so that when he goes to construct an eye compartment, it'll be placed in the perfect position, slightly clipping into the shell plate. The eye compartment only requires 2 titanium to make, which he has on him, so it's fully constructed pretty quickly. Once it's fully constructed, then the coral shell plate that the compartment was clipping into gets deleted. This is actually the purpose of the setup, to make sure the base was placed in the correct spot. If the shell plate wasn't deleted, there was a chance of an unwanted glitch where the right resources don't drop when we go to collect some. Follow up the eye compartment by building a hatch, which requires just a quartz and 2 titanium to make, which, again, he has on him, so the hatch is completed pretty quickly. He follows this up by attempting to construct an eyeglass compartment perpendicular to the hatch. Having the compartment perpendicular like this makes it so that the exit animation is skipped whenever we leave the base, saving almost a second each time. This compartment requires 2 glass to construct, but we don't have 2 glass on it. Remember what I said 91 seconds ago? Just make sure all his glass is in storage. Don't forget I said this. It's very important. If you forget, then you smell like eggs, and toads, and closet meatloaf, and... Eclipse not having the glass on him to construct this glass compartment is intentional though, because the compartment doesn't actually need to be fully constructed for the exit animation to be skipped, it just needs to be placed for construction. Coupling this with the fact that we need to save that glass for later, it just makes sense to combine the glass. Since the compartment will sit at 0% completed, the exit animation will be skipped regardless. After he places the compartment, Eclipse places 2 solar panels on top of the base and makes a mental note that he fully constructed the one closer to the hatch last. This will be important later. In the base, he'll build a fabricator, more glass, and build a couple lockers while the fabricator fabricates. We haven't gotten all of the quartz we need so far, so we're pretty much short on the glass we need for the run, but that's okay for now. Later in the run, we're going to be making a so Eclipse puts another fabricator on the wall now, which he'll construct later when he has the materials for it. That way he knows to make everything. After depositing everything into a locker, save for his tools and 2 copper, he heads back outside and under the base to chop some acid mushrooms. Explode, which kills us and damages our base, causing it to flood. Because this is the most recent base we've been to, that means it's where we respawn, and we actually spawn inside the base while it's flooding. This makes the game think we're both swimming and walking at the same time and causes their movement speed to add on to one another, making us move roughly 3 times as fast when using the Sea Glide. This is a glitch called Super Sea Glide, and without it, this run would probably be around 15 minutes longer. Super Sea Glide isn't permanent, and you can lose it in a few ways. Two notable ones are that you lose it if you break the water's surface or if you enter a base that isn't flooded. If you enter a flooded base though, you're fine, you don't lose it. If you do lose it though, which will happen a couple times in the run, then you can get it back super easily by going into a flooded base, deconstructing the hatch, and then reconstructing
What
it
are you
real quick.
waiting for?
With Super
Christmas?
Seaglide set up, Eclipse heads outside to collect some table coral since he needs 10 more for crafting purposes. These 3 here were destroyed when the acid mushroom blew up. After grabbing the final 2 table coral, he heads down into a cave to grab a ton of resources, including 4 acid mushrooms to round out all of the mushrooms needed for the run. Harvesting this cave is unique to runs where you spawn in the area referred to as Clip A, whereas if you spawn in the area called Clip C, you harvest a different cave that has 3 fewer sandstones. The 3 extra sandstones the reason why Eclipse prefers Clip A runs to Clip C runs, since the 3 extra sandstone give him a chance to get his 3rd gold of the run early, meaning that he can finish making his 2nd fabricator, greatly speeds up the fabrication process. After making batteries with both fabricators, followed by a classic, Eclipse dumps everything he has other than tools into a box and heads to the kelp forest, what Eclipse calls the biggest thing that this game has to offer. So in Subnautica, there's 4 different visual variants of metal salvage that can spawn. They're all metal salvage, like they do the same thing. They appear in your inventory the same way as the same type of item, they serve as simply metal salvage in recipes and stuff, but they have different visual appearances for the sake of more visual variety. Whenever metal salvage spawns, it can be any one of these 4 varieties. Of these 4 versions of metal salvage, 3 are considered to be good metal salvage, while 1 is considered to be bad. Brief tangent, there's a fauna species called stalkers that spawn in the kelp forest. The speedrun community for this game refers to them as dogs for the sake of simplicity, so we'll call them dogs as well because I want to fit in with the cool kids. Dogs can pick up some items if they're laying on the ground, with there being that they're picking up as metal salvage. There's only a 25% chance of them picking up whenever they pick up metal salvage. This is where the differentiation between good and bad metal salvage comes in. The 25% chance to drop a tooth only applies when a dog picks up good metal salvage. It's a 0% chance they drop a tooth when they pick up bad salvage, which is actually a bug that's sometimes referred to as bugged metal. Earlier on, I mentioned that Eclipse picked up some metal salvage in the kelp forest and to remember it for later, and the reason why he went out of his way to do that was because the metal salvage he picked up then was bad salvage. Eclipse will grab it then so that when he comes to the kelp forest now to try and get meat from the dogs will only grab the good salvage that he drops and any bad salvage that may have spawned in the area. So that's what this upcoming part is. Eclipse will drop the 2 good salvages that he grabbed from the base and leave the 1 bad salvage in his inventory. Also, something to note, good salvage and bad salvage look the same in your inventory, but they're stored when they're picked up. So that's how Eclipse salvages work when he goes to drop them. Allowing dogs to drop salvage to simply just dropping the metal and letting the dogs do their thing though. Dogs don't pick up salvage for the sake of picking up salvage. They have a mechanic called nests, which are invisible points where they'll bring the metal salvage back to. Once the dogs bring the salvage back to their nest and the salvage is in the nest, then the dog won't pick it up again since it's where they want the salvage to be. This means that the job is to constantly keep the metal salvage out of their nest so that the dogs will nests are see where the dogs are the metal. Something that can happen that we get in this run is something called a best dog. Best dogs are dogs whose nest point is above the seafloor, meaning that when they bring the salvage to their nest and drop it, the salvage falls back to the seafloor because gravity, surprisingly, is a thing that exists. The best dogs then pretty much just go into a loop of swimming up and down to pick up and drop the salvage, turning them into teeth farming machines. Another thing that can happen is that when a dog goes to pick up some metal from the ground, their mouth clips into the ground since they have these big old things for mouths. And if they drop a tooth while their mouth is clipping into the ground, then the tooth falls under the map into the void, lost to us forever. The last thing that's worth mentioning going into the tooth section is that if dogs spawn, we do this in the kelp forest. The most common number of dogs to spawn here is 2 or 3, but it's possible for none to spawn, and also possible for more than 3 to spawn, although that happening is pretty unlikely in any given run. Obviously, more dogs is better since that makes for higher chances of a tooth being dropped, but if none spawn, then we have to swim around to a different area in the kelp forest to look for some. Back to the run, after he drops the good salvage, Eclipse looks around a bit to see if any teeth have dropped and notices there are a couple cargo boxes nearby with fragments in them. When scanning the first one, he does the knife swinging animation, just to get the fun janky arm animation that doesn't have anything other than entertaining. These boxes have a small chance of spawning here and contain fragments for the mobile vehicle bay, which we need 3 fragments each for the blueprint. After grabbing 2 teeth into titanium, Eclipse heads to the second one and scans that one real quick too. He then slices a grapevine to get 2 grapevine samples and leaves 3 grapevine seed clusters from the same plant. Eclipse is then going to chill for a bit, waiting for the final 2 teeth to drop, and after that he'll grab the metal salvage he dropped and head back to the flooded base. One of the dogs will be carrying a salvage when Eclipse goes to collect them though, so he'll have to slice that dog to make it say, "Ow, why the fuck did you do that?" which causes it to open its mouth and drop the salvage. In the meantime, while this is I'd just like to say I hope you're all doing well. If not, I'd just like to remind you, as always, that no feeling is fine. I understand how at times it can feel like your life is controlled solely by thoughts of dread and despair, but I promise you, those feelings are permanent. They do not If things are difficult, then please take a step back and remind yourself that there is a tomorrow and you will be. Back to the run, we're now at the base and beginning to do fabricating to make a fiber mesh. All our metal salvage to titanium. One plus the silicone rubber and the other the lubricant, we unequip our standard O2 tank and combine it with 2 glass, 4 titanium, and a silver ore to make a high capacity O2 tank. We then make another lubricant and turn 10 so quickly thanks to the fact that the right mouse button is bound to scrolling up. Eclipse will then perform a glitch called flare storage, where he'll click to throw a flare and click to open This is pretty much the exact same thing as ghost storage and operates under the same principles. We need the flare to set it up since there isn't a delay with the lockers in this base like there is with the storage. After setting up flare storage, Eclipse is now heading to a cave/geyser area where the top area here is filled with sandstone with non-guaranteed limestone. Normally during the run, Eclipse mentally keeps track of where he's at in the sandstone bucket, which in this case he started at 4 of 8, but because there's always 8 sandstone that spawn here, he knows that he'll be at 4 of 8 again once he grabs them all. Once he clears out this area, he's going to dive down deeper out of the area of guaranteed sandstone and into the area of advanced darkness, random sandstone. Eclipse is looking in every nook and cranny for any sandstone he can find, with the goal of completing this sandstone bucket, followed by completing 2 more full buckets, which adds up to 24 total sandstone on the tracker. Ignore the bucket number not resetting when it passes 8 for a bit. While down in these caves, we take pretty much a straight path through as we search for the sandstone. The spawn locations for harvesting nodes like sandstone are actually always the same, it's just a matter of whether or not they do spawn, so Eclipse knows exactly where to look for the sandstone. Something worth noting are 2 benefits that Super Sea Glide provides to us down here. One is that the squishy from Finding Nemo looking things called drooping stingers don't deal damage to us, and the other is that an aggressive fauna called crashfish don't detect us. The reason for these are a bit complicated, so I've summarized them at the bottom of the description if you'd like to learn more. So when he exits the cave, Eclipse heads to the surface to refresh his O2, and after activating flare storage to dump everything save 2 titanium tools, we dive back down to collect some more sandstone and also look for some more metal salvage. So the reason why we're keeping track of how many sandstone we have with the goal of getting to 24 is that having 24 on the counter right now means we'll have just completed our 5th bucket and be just 1 gold away from the amount we need for the run. When the count reaches 24, Eclipse keeps searching for sandstone until he gets a gold, which is guaranteed to be in the first 4 of the new bucket, but thankfully in this run he got it on the 2nd. Down here in the dark is a giant chunk of the original ship we were on that crashed, and by building a compartment that clips into the shipwreck gets deleted, letting us scan the fragment for the mobile vehicle bay that luckily spawned inside. This means we've now scanned all 3 fragments to unlock the blueprint for the MVB, since we scanned 2 earlier in the kelp forest. After grabbing another metal salvage, we're now on our way back to our base, which, speaking of, it's pretty dark in the game right now, but the kind of ghost compartment that isn't constructed serves as a nice indicator in the distance if we need any help finding our way. This trip to the base is when we're going to be making most of our items for the rest of the run. This will be pretty hard to follow with a lot happening super fast, but here's a quick summary. Eclipse turns our metal salvage into titanium, along with turning 10 titanium into an ingot. We'll then make 5 copper wires, 4 of which will go into 4 computer chips. We'll then make 4 wiring kits, with 2 of them going into advanced wiring kits and 1 going into a rebreather. Eclipse is also going to make a power cell, and something worth noting is that the power cell requires 2 batteries in the recipe, and our Seaglide has a battery in it that's been drained a bit from all our use. It isn't required for the batteries that go into the power cell to be full charge, so Eclipse swaps the partially drained battery out of the Seaglide for a fresh one and uses the drained one in making the power cell. Sorry, I know this is a lot to keep track of, but this is a lot of what this run is: resource collection and management. Eclipse actually considers all this crafting to be one of the more difficult parts of the run because of all the work that goes into inventory management and getting good at doing it quickly. On his way out, Eclipse begins fabricating the mobile vehicle bay and deposited everything save tools, lubricant, and table coral, marking the end of the resource gathering and heavy crafting stages of the run. We're now on our way to the main wreckage of the Aurora, the ship that we were on that crashed on the planet, and heading there this early in the game is ill-advised since the Aurora is just spewing radiation into the ocean as if it were owned by BP. On his way there, Eclipse will grab a metal salvage and scan a fragment of the engine of something called the Cyclops. The Cyclops is a giant submarine that we have to build for the sole purpose of being able to use a unique fabricator inside the Cyclops to build a required item, and that fabricator is the only place you can do that. The Cyclops is split into 3 parts: the engine, the bridge, and the hull, with each section requiring 3 fragments to get the blueprint for. Engine and bridge fragments can be found randomly around the Aurora, so health permitting, you should scan one if you see one, but we'll mainly be getting the fragments in another place later. After scanning the fragment, Eclipse will swim into a gap in the Aurora's model to go inside of the ship, which isn't intended, but like, the gap is there and you can enter it. Normally you have to play the game for almost an hour until you're able to enter the Aurora, but this expedites the process a bit. After swimming in the dark for a bit, which by the way, a lot of this run is done in the dark, Eclipse will look up in a specific spot, hold space, and jump straight through the floor to enter the Aurora proper. This glitch is actually one of the 2 reasons why he plays on the September 2018 patch, since jumping through the floor was patched out. Inside, he enters the code to open the captain's quarters, which is a code that doesn't change across playthroughs, then jumps in some fire and electricity to lower his health a little as the door opens, grabs a blueprint inside, and hops back in the fire and electricity to die and spawn back at his base. Back at the base, Eclipse will pick up the mobile vehicle bay from the fabricator along with a bunch of other items from storage. He'll then make a titanium ingot, drop off the MVB in a locker, and make sure he has 2 quartz, 2 lead, 5 titanium, 2 ingots, a lubricant, and a table coral in his inventory before setting up flare storage and leaving the base. So when he leaves the base, Eclipse will partially deconstruct one of the solar panels to just under 20%, netting him a handful of resources from it, which he needs for where he's going. Earlier I mentioned that Eclipse made a mental note about which solar panel he constructed second, and it's for this exact moment. The way solar panels work in this game is they generate power during the day, and then that power is stored in it like a battery with a max capacity of 75 power. Anytime something is made in the base, it costs 5 power, and power is drawn from the solar panel. When you have multiple solar panels, the game prioritizes drawing power from the one you built first. Through all the crafting we've done so far, we've entirely drained the first solar panel we built and drained the second one down to 14 power, which is all the power we have left at the moment. Solar panels only generate energy when they're fully constructed, but if the solar panel has power stored when it's partially deconstructed, that power will still be there and accessible. It's just that more won't be generated until construction is complete. We're about to go off and do some tasks that will take some time, and while we do them, enough time will pass for it to become day again and the solar panels to begin soaking up charge again. We obviously want to maximize the amount of power we have later in the run, but realistically we're able to get by with 1 solar panel soaking up energy at this point. We still want to get as much power as possible though, even with just 1 soaking up the sun, which is why we make sure that we leave the fully drained solar panel constructed so that we can potentially end up with 89 power total instead of 75 if we left the other one constructed. After the solar panels, Eclipse begins making his way across the map and is going to harvest a hoverfish and some eye stalk seeds, then make his way towards an island with a mountain on it. It's around now we should probably talk spoilers real quick, so if you don't want to hear them, mute the video until this image of a submarine goes away. Alright, 3, 2, and 1. So the reason why we crash landed here was because the Aurora was shot down by a giant gun. This whole planet is under quarantine because of a disease here, and some past civilization on this planet decided the best way to make sure the disease never spread anywhere else was to build a giant gun that shoots down anything entering or exiting the planet. Our end goal for the run is to build a rocket and leave, with the rocket blueprints being what we got from the captain's quarters in the Aurora, but before we can do that, we have to both disable the gun and find a cure for the disease. On our to-do list, disabling the gun is the line with the gun emoji, finding the cure is the line with the test tube, and leaving the planet is the one that says, escape the planet. So yeah, that's what those mean. So right now, we're on our way to do the tasks that involve the woman making the X-arms and the detective, and in a second, Eclipse will pick up a tablet, which is a storyline item, and the first time you pick up a tablet, there's an animation where you hold it up to your face. We're going to do something called fish skip though, where we'll hold the hoverfish in our hand, and then in rapid succession, drop the fish, swap to our sea glide, and interact with the tablet. This skips the tablet animation and saves around 2 seconds or so and can be done with any fish. Also, Eclipse grabbed a hoverfish earlier just because it was nearby and they're also his favorite fish in the game. We're now going to do a bit more resource collection, looking specifically for lithium, which we have none of, and more gold, since those two, along with titanium, are the main resources we haven't finished collecting yet. In this area, lithium spawns straight up, similar to quartz, and there's another resource bucket here, which is the shale outcrop. The shale buckets are a bit more complicated than the two buckets we've covered so far. Yes, that is correct, 200. Rather than a detailed breakdown of how this bucket works, here's the distribution for the drops. Before continuing this resource collection quest, Eclipse stops to make a quick base in a specific spot using the resources he brought with him from the last base, and also switched to the extra compartment to heat up the titanium to free up inventory space. So something about the Sea Glide is that it can slightly clip out of bounds, but here the difference is that he is advantaged to be able to interact with and grab another full tablet that's sitting out of bounds here for some reason. The Sea Glide to slightly poke our head out of bounds will happen again later in the run. We're about to break open a few more shale and get all the gold we need, and after that, Eclipse is solely going to pick up lithium on its own rather than using shale to try and get it to avoid filling our inventory with useless diamond. Take that, De Beers. So we're now going to the crash area to contain some fragments, and right here, we're our second cyclones. The crash area proper, the main thing he's looking for is another engine fragment since those spawn here, as well as fragments for the moon pool. The moon pool is kind of like a ground charging station that we can build, but we won't be using it for those purposes in this run. Instead, we'll be using it for other We'll be using the moon pool for glitches. After scanning the two moon pool fragments and the final Cyclops engine fragment, we're off again to scavenge lithium. This whole stretch of the run is actually really tight on timing as our oxygen is running pretty low, but luckily Eclipse watched that one David Blaine TED Talk when learning the run, so he's able to hold his breath long enough to do it all. And also he's good at the game and is able to do it all quickly enough to not run out of breath, that too, but mainly the TED Talk thing. Like when Eclipse and I had our call to go over the run, he talked about that TED Talk for like 4.5 hours, and then pulled up the video of the speedrun, set the playback speed to double, and blasted through the rest of the info. So as soon as Eclipse saw the color of the water on the horizon have a hint of pink indicating him entering a different biome, he activated flare storage and deposited everything other than his tools, the stuff he had when he left the base, one of the tablets and one of the gold that he picked up, and also used the moment to grab the mobile vehicle bay from storage. He then sliced a bullbush and tree mushroom for samples, and will now go out of bounds for the first time by performing an MVP kick, where he wedges himself in this overhang, aims at a specific spot, pulls the MVP, and climbs on it as it jiggles and bounces around, putting him out of bounds. After grabbing the MVP for future use, we dive straight down with the reason for going out of bounds being to have a more direct path to the Lost River biome. If we hadn't gone out of bounds, then we'd have to go through a bunch of winding caves to get here, and that sounds exhausting. Fuck that. Getting back in bounds is super simple, with us just needing to swim straight through the one-way collision of the rocks, and once we do that, Eclipse will slice a ghostweed to get a seed. He'll then dive down into the nearby brine to both intentionally lower his health to about 60% and also see if any crystal and sulfur spawn, since we need some, but unfortunately none did. He then waves hello to Casper, a leviathan that's above us, before he dives down again to enter a new biome, an active lava zone. Down here, Eclipse is going to be swimming around and scanning rock surfaces to look specifically for nickel ore, which looks kind of like a tiny potato. We only need to get 3 of them, but they are pretty sparse down here, which isn't super ideal since we constantly take little ticks of damage due to how hot the water is. Nickel is both super hard to spot and very easy to mistake for other things, so it's just a perfect mess for the fact we're in a place that damages us just for being here. Eclipse spots a nickel from afar here, and action made me consider calling my eye and scheduling an exam. The second nickel is nearby, but the third one is a bit farther and requires additional scanning of the area and venturing down a shelf. Once he finds the third nickel, Eclipse begins heading across the area, being sure to wave hello to Kevin in the process. Kevin is a sea dragon leviathan, and he doesn't bother us in this run, but from what I'm told, he has a big appetite for runners of the glitchless category. Also, I'm just being told these names for the leviathans. I'm not making them up. When we enter this cave to an alien base, Eclipse immediately grabs a couple kyanite along with crystal and sulfur, both of which we need 4 of. There's some additional kyanite to the left we just skipped, and we did so because we're really low on oxygen and need to get to a specific point quickly, so we're only grabbing stuff that's on the way. When he enters this big area, Eclipse swims up to and into the alien base that's here, giving him a quick burst of oxygen, but also removing Super Sea Glide since he left the water momentarily. This is where we build our moon pool, which we'll enter real quick to set our spawn to, and it'll begin to flood on its own since it automatically takes structural damage when built at depths of over 1100 meters. Eclipse is now moving to this alien base where he previously lowered floor as a shortcut and also to take intentional damage to lower his health as much as possible. Down here, he picks up this green ion cube and then uses the tablet in his inventory to open the force field looking gate. In here, he does some fancy little hops to quickly reach a terminal that he'll interact with to retrieve a blueprint, and then hop off the walkway to take enough fall damage to kill himself, causing him to respawn back in the moon pool. Unlike another base that requires us to deconstruct and reconstruct a hatch to re-obtain Super Sea Glide, all you have to do with the moon pool is spawn in a flooded one to get Super Sea Glide, so after doing that, we re-enter the water and deconstruct the moon pool for the resources. Eclipse is going to perform another MVB clip in a specific spot, and the exact place where he does this clip is dependent on where we originally spawned and built our main base, which again, in this run is referred to as Clip A. If we had spawned in the other area that's good for high-level runs that's referred to as Clip C, we would be performing this clip in a different spot for reasons that will be apparent in a moment. So Subnautica, like many games, renders things that are close to you but not far away. There is an exception to this though. MVBs while they're in the water, they always stay rendered in. The MVB has inflatables on it, so it wants to float to the surface. So by leaving the MVB where we perform the clip and then swimming away to do other stuff, the terrain above the MVB will unload from us moving away from it, and the MVB will float all the way to the surface. The incredible thing about this exact spot where we are is that pretty much exactly above us, all the way at the top, is the main base that we built. Like seriously, it's straight above us, and the MVB will float all the way up to it. This is why we didn't spawn in the Clip C area, we wanted to spawn somewhere else, because Clip C spawn runs have us building our first base in a different location. Also addressing the elephant in the room, yes, there was a Clip B at one point, but it was so bad that no one does runs with it anymore. Now that he's out of bounds, Eclipse is heading down and looking specifically for his 2 other crystal and sulfur since this is the place to get it. You can pick up the sulfur while you're out of bounds, but you have to be careful to not get too close to the sulfur and accidentally back. After you grab the last sulfur in a moment, he'll then dive down deeper on his way to the main alien base we're going to. On our way down, we get a weird transmission thing from a Leviathan who wants to help us complete one of our main tasks, the one with the detective emoji.
Baby. This really pisses me off.
After the scene from the fountain ends and we get back in bounds, we're going to slash a sea crown to get a seed of it, as well as grab another ion cube that's down here. So normally when you enter this area for the first time, there's a big cutscene animation thing that plays out. Out of bounds, we skip the trigger for it and it doesn't play, and the Leviathan that sent the transmission to us stays in a power pose the whole time. After activating the first pedestal with an ion cube, Eclipse then uses the Sea Glide to poke his head out of bounds into some sand to interact with the second pedestal. Normally the Leviathan blows the sand away for us, but she's busy right now. After the animation plays out, we teleport back to a set location, which is actually right next to the small makeshift base we made recently. There, Eclipse will deconstruct the partially built apartment to get the titanium back, then build a fabricator inside the actual base. He'll then use all the seeds and samples he's collected from plants to make an object called hatching enzymes that he just got the recipe for from activating the portal with the ion. He'll then deconstruct the fabricator he just built along with the hatch to get back the resources from them. It also makes this base not a complete one, so the next time we die, we'll spawn back with the light. And yeah, that's right. The whole purpose of this base and collecting all those samples was to make one item. Eclipse then opens his PDA right before entering the portal, letting a menu while he brings us back to the pedestal Leviathan area. In the menu, he unequips his O2 tank and drops his quartz and table coral since he no longer needs them. When the teleportation finishes, he swings forward and interacts with the pedestal ahead to use the hatching enzymes, which causes a bunch of baby Leviathans to hatch. In a move antithetical to the tone of this channel, we actually won't be watching the Miracle of Light, choosing to instead immediately turn around and get our babies back to the teleporter to head back to the surface. When we finish teleporting back to the makeshift base area, somehow the baby Leviathans will have beaten us up there, with them having begun to spawn these orangish yellowish periodically. Clips then does something called Cure Clip, where he pushes a bubble up against the rock wall, positions himself to be above and slightly behind it while facing away from the wall, then interacts with the bubble, which forces him to be eye level with it and puts him out of bounds. Interacting with the enzyme bubble plays out an animation where which crosses off one of the items on our checklist. Now that we're out of bounds, we're going to swim along the side of a huge structure called the Quarantine Enforcement Platform, QEP for short, and you'll notice our O2. This is intentional and part of an upcoming glitch called QEP Quick Death, which Eclipse considers to be the hardest glitch in the run. So like I said a few moments ago, Eclipse on a and him doing that is considered to be the beginning of the QEP Quick Death process. His O2 level hits 0 here, so Eclipse re-equips his O2 tank. This brings his O2 level back up to 84, but all this air is in the tank, and if the tank is unequipped again, he'll go back down to 0. Eclipse will then swim up to a pedestal that he needs to interact with to disable the QEP and complete a task on our to-do list. Before interacting with the pedestal though, Eclipse is going to pull up his PDA. The moment after he clicks to pull it up, he has a small window where he's able to interact with the pedestal, which he'll do. This causes the animation of interacting with the pedestal to play out while he has his PDA out, waving all about the PDA actually still being interacted. At the end of the interaction animation, a grinding noise will play which indicates the storyline being updated based on what we just did. Our goal with this glitch is to interact with our waving about PDA to unequip our O2 tank and time it in a way where we die right after the storyline updates, which warps us back to our life pod and skips a ton of swimming. To do this, Eclipse will position his cursor in a very specific spot right after initiating the animation, then grab the O2 tank off its equipped location in the PDA and move his cursor to an exact spot while holding onto the O2 tank. Eclipse will hold the tank in that spot and wait for the animation to play out, and at a specific point, his cursor in the tank will be directly over his inventory, at which point he'll let go of the tank to take it off. Technically, he can just click on the O2 tank initially to unequip it, but if he did that, then the tank would be unequipped too soon and he'd die before the storyline gets updated. Unequipping the tank at the right time causes us to die right after the storyline updates, respawning us back in our life pod and overall saving somewhere between 10 and 20 seconds. Alright, let's see this all in real time. Because we die with our PDA open, that means it'll still be open when we spawn back in, so when we do, Eclipse menus in the darkness to re-equip the O2 tank before setting off back towards our main base. When we get there, we'll get to work immediately by grabbing supplies from our lockers, including the other purple tablet, and also turn 3 glass and 3 stalker teeth into 3 enameled glass. Those will be going into making Cyclops. Before we leave, Eclipse is going to deconstruct and reconstruct the hatch to equip the remaining super seed line, and then set up flare storage as he heads out. Outside the base, Eclipse begins looking around for an extra metal salvage to grab from the titanium it provides, as well as a peeper to grab to perform another fish skip with. Peepers can be hard to wrap your hands around. Trust me, I've handled my fair share of peepers in my life, but once he finally gets a hold of one, Eclipse begins making a straight line towards the sparse reef biome. It takes a hot second to swim there, so don't mind me just fast forwarding. When he arrives, Eclipse quickly grabs a salt deposit, 2 gel sacks, and 2 rubies. Once we collect all of those, we'll head up and over to another little cave system where there's a cache located. Eclipse is going to interact with the pedestal outside of the cache to use up his last purple tablet, which opens up the vault for us. Inside are a handful of ion cubes, which we'll grab 4 of to complete our ion cube collection for the run. We then work our way out of these caves, taking a left, then a right, then a left, which leads us to a big wreck on the ocean floor. Eclipse is going to build a compartment for the wreck to despawn like we did with the wreck earlier. Luckily, at this wreck, we can find all the remaining fragments we need for the Cyclops. Additionally, the blueprint for the one item that we specifically need to make inside of the Cyclops is located here as well. We need to interact with the data box to get it, and we perform fish skip when doing so by dropping our peeper, but this time swapping to our scanner, sea glide, then interacting with the data box. This lets us scan a nearby fragment while inspecting the blueprint we just got, which is for the Cyclops shield generator. After doing this and scanning 2 hull fragments, we then look around for our last fragment, which is for the bridge of the Cyclops, which is found down on the ground next to the red. After scanning it, we'll then head into a nearby cave where we'll grab 3 deep shrooms. Grabbing the shrooms will be immediately followed by us activating flare storage to deposit any new items we've picked up so that they aren't lost when we die in a moment. We then proceed to knife the mushrooms to get them to explode in our face, killing us and warping us back to our base. When he spawns, Eclipse will right away grab the metal salvage from storage and make it into titanium, then pick up the blinding flare so he doesn't have to look at it. Him making this titanium marks the end of our titanium and resource collection for the week. He then picks up glass, copper wire, and computer chips from storage while dropping off everything he doesn't need. Then head outside and constructing a new base that we make sure is far enough away from the other one we just exited so that the new one doesn't snap into place on the first base's construction grid. This is to set up what's probably the weirdest glitch in this run, the item dupe. After making 2 eye compartments near each other, Eclipse then partially constructs a window on the higher up eye compartment. For some reason, the game thinks that this window is built on the lower eye compartment, so Eclipse is able to fully deconstruct the compartment that the window is on, causing the partially constructed window to just float there. Eclipse will then build an L compartment in the location of the compartment followed by the game doesn't like this very much since windows are not supposed to be placeable on L compartments, and it makes the game think that we're building 2 bases whenever we finish constructing an object. By this I mean that whenever construction is completed on something on this base's construction grid, 2 of the constructed objects are built in the same place instead of 1, with resources only being expended for the completion of 1. In order to build the Cyclops and everything else to end the run, we need 9 titanium ingots, which is a lot of titanium to go out and collect, so instead, Eclipse will build 1 moon pool. It will require 2 ingots to build, and since we just set up the iron glitch, then after expending 2 ingots to build a moon pool, there will be 2 fully constructed moon pools in place. Eclipse will then fully deconstruct one of the 2 moon pools, giving him back all the resources that went into it, including 2 titanium ingots. He'll then quickly partially deconstruct the moon pool and reconstruct it, with the completion of construction producing 2 moon pools in place again. Eclipse will then fully deconstruct the second moon pool to get 2 more titanium ingots, bringing him up to 4 total. Eclipse repeats the process of deconstructing and reconstructing the moon pool to dupe it, and deconstructing the duped moon pool until he has 8 ingots, at which point he then partially deconstructs the original moon pool until it gives him back an ingot, bringing him to 9 ingots total, which is exactly how many he needs. After clearing up some inventory space, he then grabs the mobile vehicle and it's finally made its way all the way up to the surface. He redeploys it in a specific spot where there's sufficient depth to build the big structure we need to make to finish the Neptune launch platform. After placing the launch pad's location, we head back to the base and grab a ton of lithium from storage and use them with our titanium ingots to make 6 plasma ingots. While in here, Eclipse has to deconstruct and reconstruct the hatched Super Sea Glide since he lost it when he climbed the MVB to make the launch platform. Once he heads outside the base in a moment, he's going to pick up the mobile vehicle bay to adjust its position slightly since he wants to make the Cyclops somewhere else in an exact spot. He'll then dolphin dive onto the launch platform and initiate construction for the gantry of the rocket. That's the big overhead crane thingy. Dolphin dives onto the launch platform and uses his Super Sea Glide again, but it's really annoying and slow to repeatedly lose it during this segment. This is why he deploys his MVB in this exact spot and begins construction of the Cyclops overhead before heading back to the base to grab and make more items. It'll be clear why this helps not lose Super Sea Glide in a moment. On the list for things to do in the base right now are to reacquire Super Sea Glide by doing the hatchling, and also to make and craft a final plasteel ingot, another enameled glass, as well as using some rubies to make aerogel and ion cubes to make ion batteries. By the time we head back out of the base, the Cyclops will have completed construction, causing it to hang suspended in the air until we swim close enough, at which point it'll drop from the sky. With where Eclipse positioned it, it lands partially on the platform, tilting half of it underwater. This way we no longer lose Super Sea Glide when going to make rocket sections. The Cyclops landing on the platform and tilting it down into the water is actually the second reason why we play on some it doesn't lower the platform like this. We're now on on our base one final
That's
time
one
to craft some ion
Space
power cells and
Marine.
polyaniline, and after beginning the final crafting, we head outside and sit alongside the base since you can actually grab items from outside and save a small bit of time. We're then going to initiate the penultimate construction on the platform, and rather than enter the Cyclops the normal way, Eclipse clips his head into the side of the sub and interacts with the ladder from there to get inside. This is called Tex Clip and it saves no time. Eclipse just likes doing it for fun. Inside the Cyclops, we steal a power cell and then combine it with an advanced wiring kit and the polyaniline to create the Cyclops shield generator. That one damned item we need that if we didn't need to make the Cyclops to get, it'd save like 10 minutes overall. Outside, we just need to wait around to begin the final construction on the rocket. Eclipse will then go in back of the rocket and ride the elevator up, and while he does, it's important to note that he made sure he still has his 2 flares for this part. There's 3 levers inside the rocket that need to be pulled, but they all have animations to them, but by doing the same flare storage where he goes to throw the flare, then interacts with the lever, the animation for each of them is skipped. It looks like he has 3 flares at this part, but he only has 2 and is able to pick them up practically as soon as he throws them by just scrolling. After climbing this ladder, there's 2 more consoles we need to interact with, but unfortunately you can't flare skip them, so we just have to do them normally. Eclipse will then interact with the time capsule and write a little message for the viewers at home and dump all his junk into the capsule for fun. This isn't something you normally do in the run, but Eclipse decided to do it for the special occasion. While Eclipse does this monitor and then types out the message, real quick before the run ends, thank you so much to everyone who supports the channel on Patreon. Your support is so entirely unnecessary, but it is so appreciated and helps keep the channel afloat. If you'd like to throw in as little as $1 a month to help with the channel, you get access to videos early, as well as updates on videos as they're being made, and also occasional bonus content like Fanfiction Fridays or voting on runs to be covered in future videos. This Subnautica run was actually chosen and voted for by the patrons, so shout out to them for the awesome choice. Again, supporting the channel monetarily is entirely unnecessary, but it helps a ton and is greatly appreciated. So after typing out the message, let's sit down in Bert's chair to initiate the rocket's launch, with the run officially ending on the launch of the rocket. Because we beat the game so quickly, the game has a huge backlog of dialogue that it needs to get through that it spams out at us that would have been doled out over the next hour of playtime or so. But yeah, that about wraps up the run. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much on behalf of both myself and Eclipse. And an enormous thank you specifically to Eclipse for helping make this video possible. Eclipse provided me with so much valuable info over the run, and I truly don't feel like I made the video without him. Plus, I got to hear all about David Lynch, which was a blast from the past. Please be sure to check out Eclipse's Twitch and YouTube. They're both linked in the description and are loaded with more Subnautica content. And if you'd like to learn more about Subnautica speedruns or check out other categories, then be sure to head on over to speedrun.com and use that search bar. And lastly, as always, check out the Tomato Anus Discord server. The community there are a bunch of considerate people who love to chat about just about anything and are always welcoming of new faces. That's all for this video though. This was an any% survival glitched speedrun of Subnautica. I've been Tomato Anus, and I hope you have an above average day.
king, baby. Cool.
Hey everyone, my name's Tomato Anus, also known as Shriveled Salami, and this, excuse me, these are any % speedruns of Elden Ring. This video will be covering how speedruns are done of both the any % restricted and unrestricted categories. These runs are performed by Seeker, who not only holds the record for the any % unrestricted category, but is a top runner for the restricted category. I'll write the script for this video to make sure it's all as accurate as possible. This is also Seeker's 6th time helping make a video for this channel, so everyone be sure to say hi to your favorite Uncle Seeker in the comments. So if you're unaware, Elden Ring has multiple any % categories, with 2 of them being restricted and unrestricted. Both have the same objective, reach the credits of the game, and they both follow the same standard rules of any % work glitches are allowed, but in every leaderboard category aside from the unrestricted one, there's one glitch that's banned, the zip glitch. This glitch absolutely breaks the game and turns it into a very different kind of run, and it's actually banned in every category except unrestricted due to hardware dependencies. In this video, we're going to first go over the full restricted speedrun and then build off that knowledge by covering the unrestricted run afterwards. If you'd prefer to watch the rest of this video without commentary, we'll link in the description, and so are Seeker's personal bests for both categories, which are also commentary. Glitches in general aren't your cup of tea, then there's also a link in the description to the current glitchless record by Forza. For the restricted run that we're about to go over, I've put together a checklist of things we need to do during the run in order to beat the game. This list is entirely arbitrary and the tasks are cherry-picked by myself. Like, several of these things are entirely optional for beating the game, and there's actually a lot of things in the route that you're required to do that aren't on the list. The purpose of this list, though, isn't to be all-encompassing, just a guide for more casual viewers to have to help keep track of how far into the run and to get we're approaching the 2-minute mark. That means we're about to get cut off.
Oh, hey there, Chicago guy. What's up with the jacket? Hey, Minnesota guy. It was gonna be a prop in my movie, Romeo and Juliet 2, but production got canceled when they found out I took this jacket off a dead guy I found laying next to another dead guy who looked super similar. That's right. Shady Drifter and Random Carnival Goer are canonically dead and will never be seen again. Jeez Louise, I'm so sorry about your movie. It's okay, it would have flopped anyways. Kids these days want something new, something fresh. Like Harry Belafonte. Isn't he like 95? Anyways, because the movie's canceled, I'm now contractually obligated to have at least one more conversation with you about the product that we wrote that product placement scene for. Oh, you mean Keeps? Yeah, the subscription service that helps men keep their hair with clinically proven research backed. Stop hair loss and keep hair growth. Oh, wow. What am I supposed to say? I didn't know this was gonna happen today, and I was planning to go to the park, and I wasn't given any lines. Oh, what's that? They provide 24/7 care and support with each treatment plan, connecting you to a network of medical advisors, specialists, and prescribers who will help you pick the right products and treatments for you and your hair goals. Oh, right. And check out these before and after photos. No, dude, you're way ahead. Wow, and you can easily subscribe to Keeps and get refill reminders so you never run low on the products you need to take care of your hair?
You betcha. And just look at these before and after photos and how great a job.
All the Keeps treatment plans are doctor recommended and delivered straight to your door at about half the cost of a traditional pharmacy.
And check out these before and after photos.
Good job, dude. You got it that time. Yes, nailed it. Hair loss stops with Keeps. To get 50% off your first order, go to keeps.com/tomato or click the link in the description. That's KEEPS.com/tomato. How'd I do? Honestly, you did great.
Huh, that jacket must have been a time machine.
So for the restricted run, Seeker plays on patch 1.02, which is an officially released patch of the game from before and whatnot as they were when the game was originally released. For this run, Seeker chooses to play with the Warrior Origin, mainly because then he starts with 16 dexterity and 10 strength. The main weapon we're going to use in this run has stat requirements of 16 dex and 11 strength, but when you two-hand a weapon in this game, your strength with that weapon is increased by 50%, meaning that we'll be able to properly wield this mystery weapon with our starting stats. For his keepsake, Seeker chooses the Fanged Blade Ashes, since they come in handy for a trick at the end of the run, and when used, summons 2 Edge Spirits to aid you in combat. The rest of the character creation doesn't matter and is purely cosmetic, so once he's all set with his character, Seeker begins the run. The first thing he has to do when he spawns in is grab the Tarnished Wizened Finger, since it's required to open the door and exit the first room. When he goes to open the door, Seeker quits out to the main menu and loads back into the game, which skips the door opening animation, saving a couple seconds of in-game time. This is called a quit out, and they're littered everywhere throughout the run normally to skip animations, but they are slower in real time, so Seeker opted just was going to showcase it. For clarification, there's tons of quit outs throughout the run for other reasons, but this is the only one that's used in this skip animation. Usually the run has a lot of instances of that. Up ahead, he's going to jump off the cliff on the edge of the boss arena at a specific pebble on the ground to make sure the boss fight activates, which causes the boss to spawn right before we die from the fall. You're supposed to die to this boss, or right after you defeat them, with you being transported to the tutorial area once you do, and it's faster to just answer the call of the void. But you do have to make sure the boss fight activates before you die, else you just spawn back to the building we started in. When he goes into the tutorial area, Seeker will blow right past the hole you're supposed to drop down for the tutorial and head straight to the door that leads to the exit. On the other side of the door is an elevator he'll ride up, and on it he'll drop his starting weapons and shields so they aren't in his inventory, so that menuing is easier later on when he upgrades the mystery weapon. So throughout the run, you'll often see Seeker jumping while he's going upstairs and slopes. Normally as you run, you move at a constant speed, somewhere around 10 units of speed, but when you jump, your speed spikes up to around 12 units before dropping down to around 8 units and going back up to around 10 units again as you land and continue running. When you jump up slopes, you land before your speed has a chance to dip under 10, so you're exclusively moving at speeds equal to or greater than your running speed when you jump as you go up a slope. So when he gets out into the open world, Seeker is going to hang a right here to avoid the aggro of the roaming tree sentinel. This isn't because we're afraid of the tree sentinel, like the little show who never died again. It's mainly because if he notices us, then we're put into combat, and your stamina drains while you're in combat, which obviously isn't ideal. Right now, we're on our way to our first Site of Grace, this game's equivalent to a bonfire, which are checkpoints scattered throughout the world that we can rest at to recover health, level up, fast travel to other Sites of Grace, and more. As he makes his way there, Seeker is still trying to avoid getting too close to any roaming enemies for the stamina reason I just mentioned, and he also jumps here and there while he's going up slope. It's not really worth it to just spam jump going uphill where we are now, because there are lots of small up and down areas where there's a good chance we'd accidentally jump while heading downhill briefly, which actually loses time when jumping uphill saves time. So when you first discover a Site of Grace, there's an animation that plays out of you holding out your hand to it. You have to wait for this animation to finish before you can interact with the Site of Grace again to sit down at it and actually do Site of Grace stuff. However, if you block or move at the end of that Site of Grace discovery animation, you slightly truncate the animation, letting you interact with the Site of Grace slightly sooner, which is exactly what Seeker does here to sit down and get into dialogue with Melina. The reason we made a beeline to this Site of Grace is the first time you sit at it, you have this conversation with Melina, and at the end of it, she gives you the spectral steed whistle. After mashing through all the dialogue lines, Seeker is then going to pull up his inventory and use the spectral steed whistle, which summons Torrent, our spirit steed. No, not this guy. This guy. It's only after Seeker uses the whistle and gets moving that he'll then pull up his inventory again and actually equip the whistle for quick use, since it's faster to just use it from the inventory the first time than to equip it and use it. While riding Torrent, Seeker times out using his sprint/speed burst every 6 gallops. This times out the new speed burst with the end of the previous one. It also times out our stamina to drain minimally, since it has a chance to recover slightly before each sprint. So as we continue through this area, we enter Stormhill, where Seeker is going to discover another site of grace up here on the right, which is the Stormhill Shack site of grace. Behind the curtain of the game, the map of Elden Ring is divided into a bunch of squares on a grid, with each square having an assigned default spawn location. Some of these grid squares have default spawn locations that are out of bounds, with the grid square of the Stormhill Shack site of grace being one of them. This comes in handy for a glitch we're going to do, but more on that in a moment. After avoiding squirrels here, since they body block you in the game as opposed to how they turn into speed bumps in real life, Seeker is going to perform a jump at a certain angle just ahead as he's falling off a cliff's edge, which gives him just enough distance to barely land on the other side. This jump isn't intended, and completing it means that you're pretty much skipping all of Stormvale Castle, Margit and Godric included. To complete the skip of Stormvale Castle, all Seeker will need to do is get down safely from these high up cliffs, which he'll do in a bit by jumping down in a specific spot where he has rocks to land on that'll break his fall and prevent fall damage from killing him. So right now, Seeker's on his way to another site of grace, this one being the Liurnia Highway South site on the other side of Stormvale Castle. So far, we haven't done much other than discover a few sites of grace, but that was all set up for what we're about to do, a wrong warp. When Seeker arrives at and discovers the next site of grace, he'll then use the item called Memory of Grace to warp back to the last site of grace he interacted with, which will end up being the one he's about to discover. As soon as he confirms to use the item and warp though, he's going to pull up his map and choose to fast travel to the Stormhill Shack site. He'll then confirm the travel immediately after hearing the high-pitched chime sound that plays as a part of the Memory of Grace item use. Doing this with the correct timing stacks the fast travel into warp and causes us to spawn at the default location for the grid square of the site we attempted to fast travel to. As I said earlier, the default location for the grid square of the site we're fast traveling to, Stormhill Shack, is out of bounds, so when we load in, we'll be out of bounds. Seeker does a quit out, and because the last place where he was at a valid inbounds position is in the grid square where he activated the wrong warp, he'll load in at the default location for that grid square. This loads us in farther up the road from the site of grace we discovered and activated the wrong warp at, saving on a bit of running, and it happens to be near a waygate, which are like teleporters in this game. You're teleported somewhere else in the map, and this waygate happens to teleport us to the entrance of HOLLiiWOOD Academy, all the way up here. We need to get into the academy, but the front gate is locked, so Seeker will discover the site of grace where we're fast traveling back to later once he has the key to the gate. After discovering the site of grace, he's going to do a double jump on Torrent to reach a rock spire so that he doesn't take fall damage and die as he sets off across the lake. We're going to make a beeline towards the building in the distance since it's where our main weapon for the run is located, the Ice Rind Hatchet. Like I said earlier, we need 16 dex and 11 strength to wield this weapon properly, but with two-handing, our strength goes up to 15, so we're in the clear. This weapon is absolutely busted because of its skill/ability, which is called Hoarfrost Stomp. It's such a strong ability that it was nerfed in later patches, which is why runners of this category play on this earlier patch. So entirely different topic real quick. Earlier I mentioned that when we wrong warped, we ended up in the grid square we ended up in because that was the grid square where we had our last valid inbounds position. Frequent viewers of the channel who have watched our videos covering other From Software games likely knew right away I was talking about the concept of stable ground. Stable ground, for the most part, is what it sounds like. Ground that isn't moving that you can stand on and walk on. Most places you can walk in this game are stable ground, with things like elevators, air, and boss arenas not being stable ground. While you walk around, the game is constantly updating your position based on what the most recent stable ground position you stood on was. When you quit out of the game and load back in, you respawn back at your most recent stable ground position. So right up here is the dragon from Shrek 4D guarding the key to enter the academy, whom Seeker will run right under before quitting out. You can't fast travel while you're in combat, and quitting out exits you from combat, meaning when he loads in, Seeker can grab the key and fast travel back to the academy gate safely. You can't fast travel for a second or so after loading in though, so Seeker avoided picking up the key and going back in before he fast traveled, since he could fill that second window of doing nothing with something productive rather than grabbing the key earlier and losing time from that. Speedrunning's all about small optimizations like this. So here at the academy, Seeker will discover the site of grace to travel back to later, and then begin setting up what's called the Pegasus glitch. After interacting with the Grace, Seeker immediately summons Torrent and rides at the railing ahead, and then jumps off and over the railing and quits out immediately. When he loads back in, Torrent will be standing next to him and they'll both be just before the railing, and then Seeker will hop over the railing and slowly walk to the corner on the far left. This ledge is considered to be stable ground, so when we quit out and spawn back in at our most recent stable ground position, it's on this ledge. When we load back in, Torrent spawns at our side again, but on the right since there's no space on the left, causing Torrent to fall into the abyss. Almost as sad as when Artax died. Torrent dying like this bugs out the game, so when Seeker re-summons Torrent, Torrent can do this. Sorry, Oscar Isaac, but yeah, we fly now. We're flying straight to the 4 belfries area ahead, and the way flying works is that your height remains constant unless you run up a slope which increases your flying rate. The only way to decrease your height is by jumping down to ground to keep you in landing within a second of when you jump. Otherwise you freeze in the air and die from falling into the void. The only ways to break the glitch are by quitting out, fast traveling to another Grace, or changing area with a loading screen. If you don't break the glitch, then you basically run at the same height the whole time. So at the 4 belfries area are 4 different way gates to various areas of the map, and at the top of the 4 belfries is a chest that contains an imbued sword key, which is a one-time use item that activates a way gate here of your choosing. Seeker stands on the chest before opening it, causing him to slide off as it opened, which cancels the character's opening animation. Now that he has the key, Seeker does a quit out to break the Pegasus glitch since that's still active. Once he loads back in, Seeker will discover the nearby site of Grace and drop down to the shelf below, using the ledge on the belfry to break his landing. He'll then use the imbued sword key to activate a nearby way gate, which he'll use to teleport to Crumbling Farah Missoula. Crumbling Farah Missoula is an endgame area, sort of the beginning to the end. You're able to visit it early in the game via the belfries. Normally you're on a floating piece of debris far away though, removed from the actual area, and it's more of a you're gonna be here later and it's gonna fuck your shit up moment. When he loads in though, Seeker is going to wrong warp by using the memory of Grace and fast traveling back to the Stormhill Shack. After first loading in out of bounds in the shack area just like earlier, Seeker will quit out, which will cause him to spawn in the default location of Farah Missoula, which is actually the starting spawn location for the area when you arrive here later in the game. This inserts our level 8 character into the end of Elden Ring. I was like level 130 the first time I got here. Right away, Seeker equips the Ice Rind Hatchet, and if you look at the weapons icon in the bottom left, you'll notice that it doesn't have the red X in the top right corner, signifying insufficient stats to wield since he's two-handing it. Something worth calling out is now that he has his weapon equipped, you'll see Seeker blocking while running and jumping a lot throughout the run. This is because if you block and jump, your recovery time after landing gets set to normal instantly, so it's pretty much always beneficial to block if you jump and have your weapon out. You'll also see Seeker just spamming block while running around and not jumping, just out of muscle memory for if he has to jump for some reason. After running past these Azula Beastmen, Seeker is going to perform a quit out. This is to reset the enemy's aggro so that Seeker isn't in combat so his stamina won't drain, but he got a bit unlucky in this run with him staying in combat for some reason. This puts him in a bit of a bind with being low on stamina as he needs to run past the dragon from Shrek the Hall. But quick tip for all you Elden Ring players out there, if you crouch briefly in the middle of sprinting, you don't lose that much speed and your stamina regens super fast, so that's what Seeker does here. You'll see Seeker do this a lot throughout the run as well. Pretty much anytime he's sprinting and his stamina is draining, so anytime he's in combat. Something you might have noticed Seeker did when he entered the dragon area is perform an attack before he landed after jumping down off the ledge. This is because stamina consumption is reduced when you swing your weapon before landing, and you can get an animation cancel too if you hit a wall. If you don't swing your weapon, then you can get what's referred to as a hard fall, which consumes a lot of your stamina depending on the height. If you missed Seeker doing it earlier, then don't worry, because it'll happen more throughout the run as well. So out here, he's about to jump down to an item that he'll pick up, which is the Hero's Rune 2. When used, this item gives us 20,000 runes, which are this game's equivalent to souls, the currency you collect from killing enemies that are dropped on death and can be used to level up and purchase things like items or weapon upgrades. So normally in runs, after running through this room filled with enemies, Seeker does a quit out so that he doesn't have to worry about stamina and also to dodge any potential attacks, but for the sake of reducing loading screens in the video, he decided to just keep moving through the level and figured he can just crouch 4 times to make up for stamina loss. He just picked up the item called Somberstone Miner's Bell Bearing 4, which will give you an NPC later in the run to be able to purchase certain items from them. Here Seeker is about to perform an attack while falling for the reasons I mentioned a moment ago, and he actually almost gets clipped by some fire from the dragon from Shrek the Musical, which would have killed him if it connected. After grabbing a somber smithing stone 9 here for upgrading his weapon later, Seeker is going to run to the site of Grace ahead and roll past it before quitting out. The quit out is to lose aggro from the dragon from Shrek the Musical so that Seeker can fast travel to perform a wrong warp. When he loads back in, Seeker interacts with the site of Grace to discover it and then performs a wrong warp by using the memory of Grace and fast traveling to the 4 Belfry site of Grace. This causes him to spawn at the default location for the Belfry's grid square, which happens to actually be inbounds and in the direction that we'd like to head next. This was our intention with this wrong warp, so no need to quit out to spawn in at a different default location like with the previous warps. Right now, we're still kind of riding around and setting up all the dominoes to fall later in the run, with the domino we're currently focused on being upgrading our weapon. We're currently headed to a nearby NPC named War Counselor E.G., who sells low-tiered smithing stones that can be used to upgrade your weapons and who also provides weapon upgrading as a service. Seeker used the Hero's Rune to get the 20,000 runes from it, and when he speaks to E.G., he's going to purchase one of each of the smithing stones that are available. He's then going to back out of the shopping menu and upgrade his hatchet 4 times to increase its damage and scaling by a fair amount. This will then be rounded out by Seeker quitting out of the dialogue with EG and fast traveling to the Academy, where he's gonna perform the Pegasus glitch again. While Seeker finishes with EG and sets up the Pegasus glitch, I'd just like to say, I hope that you're all doing well. If you aren't, then please remember that how you're feeling does not define you nor the rest of your life. No matter what's going on, whatever's living in your head, or whatever is clouding your thoughts, those things cannot take away from you the fact that there is a tomorrow. Any thoughts of dread or despair, I promise you, are not permanent. Again, they do not define who you are, and they do not define the rest of your life. If things ever get too much at times, then please take a step back and remind yourself that there is a tomorrow and you will be here for it. Just remember, no feeling is final. If things are really difficult, it's okay to talk to others about it and ask for help. We're all human. Back to the run, now that we have the Pegasus glitch set up, Seeker uses it to ride around the outside of the Academy and through a wall to be out of bounds inside of the Academy structure. Past the wall, Seeker is going to ride onto some solid ground on the left, which will put him back in bounds and load everything in. He has to make sure he keeps a wide berth about his turn to the solid ground though, because if you cut it too tightly, you cross a wall too soon that gets you stuck in bounds in a different spot. As soon as he touches solid ground and everything spawns in, Seeker immediately hops off Torrent to jump onto a giant turning wheel and drops down onto one of the paddles to ride it like an elevator. He'll then drop down one more time into a pit with crystals and an abductor virgin. This enemy can grab you and put you into its chest hole, and if they do, you're captured and teleported to a faraway location, and that's actually what we want to happen. If the virgin doesn't go to grab you right away, you can quit out like Seeker does to reset it, and then when you load back in, if you get into melee range with it while being slightly on the right side of it, it'll always go to grab you. Getting grabbed by this virgin kills us and causes us to spawn in Volcano Manor, which is pretty far from where we just were. Almost as if the virgin abducted us or something. How could we have seen this coming? When Seeker spawns, he's going to do some parkour over some magma and then jump off a ledge. When he jumps off the ledge, he's going to try to get as close as possible to solid ground so that it takes just 2 rolls in magma after landing to reach it. Up ahead, he's going to hang a left up a ramp to head onto a roof and grab a Somber Smithing Stone 6 for upgrading his weapon again, and you'll notice he blocks a lot during this part. This is partly what we talked about earlier with blocking and jumping, but blocking also helps you avoid the slowdown pickup animation for items and helps you do 180s without slowing down. After grabbing the item up here, he's super careful with his pathing to avoid splash damage from the projectile that just hit the roof, since it'd kill him if he got too close. At the stairs on top of the slope he's about to run up, he's going to jump over the last step, since you can sometimes get caught on it if you just run into it normally. He then runs into this elevator to ride it up, and was fast enough in this area to make a cycle where the nearby man serpent didn't notice him. When the elevator reaches the top, Seeker is going to jump to get off the ride slightly early, and when he goes to pick up the nearby Somber Smithing Stone 5, he'll again block to cancel the slowdown animation when he grabs it in 180s. He's then going to run up some stairs to a boss arena, which he's going to make sure he enters in a specific spot while approaching from a slight left to right angle. Since boss arenas aren't stable ground, if you quit out while inside, then you spawn outside of the arena, since that's where your most recent stable ground position is. Seeker's approach made his most recent stable ground position a specific spot that he wants to respawn in after quitting out as soon as he spawns the Godskin Noble boss.
What are you
When
waiting
Seeker
for?
load back in,
Christmas?
the fog gate will be spawned at the entrance of the arena since the boss is now spawned. Seeker is then going to block when he loads in and tap W twice to move forward slightly, and then unblock and tap a key to walk until he's close enough to the fog gate to interact and enter. This makes it so that when he enters, he's partly stuck in the fog gate and the Noble's AI isn't activated. By then waiting a few seconds before moving and doing a 360 to get himself unstuck, Seeker is able to freely run around the arena and attack the Noble without its AI ever activating. The reason why we lobotomize this boss with intent of killing him is for the runes and weapon he gives upon defeat. The quickest way for Seeker to kill the boss is to spam Hoarfrost Stomp, and when he does so, he makes sure he's positioned between the clusters of paper on the ground and the one lone paper a few steps ahead. Hoarfrost Stomp deals damage in a wave, and this boss is so big that he can be hit by multiple wave hitboxes at once. Standing in this spot while performing the stomp ensures that
What are you
every
waiting
stomp will do
for?
3 ticks of
Christmas?
damage, but you may notice that doing the stomp moves you forward slightly, so Seeker has to move back to where he started every 3 or 4 stomps. After killing the boss, a site of grace spawns in the arena which Seeker interacts with while blocking to truncate the animation and then sits down at the site. When the character speaks with Melina here, it's actually RNG for which position you sit in, this one or one where your legs are crossed. If your legs are crossed, then when the character reaches out to Melina in a second, they have to uncross them first, losing around 3 to 4 seconds. Our character reaching Mormon first base with Melina brings us to the round hold table, which is this game's hub area that is only accessible via fast travel. There, Seeker will run up to an NPC named the Twin Maiden Husks and give them the Somberstone Miner's Bell Bearing 4 that he picked up in Fair Missoula, which unlocks higher level Somber Smithing Stones for purchase from them. He then purchases a Somber Smithing Stone 8 from them, as well as a Spirit Calling Bell, which is an item that you need in order to summon Ashes, which, if you remember from the start of the run, we selected to have Fanged Imp Ashes be a starting item. Normally an NPC gives you this item super early in the game, but it's entirely missable, so it's available for purchase in case you do, and we needed to go to the shop anyways to get the Smithing Stone, so may as well buy the bell there, then go out of our way to get it for free. Back at Volcano Manor, Seeker's current goal is to get the Royal Knight's Resolve weapon skill / ability. He's going to equip that skill on the Godskin Stitcher, which is the weapon he got for killing the Godskin Noble that he equips here as he pushes the lever to lift the bridge. Seeker's gonna take a direct path to the Royal Knight's Resolve by jumping twice to get fully on top of the big wheel on the right at the end of the bridge, then counting 3 steps before jumping again to time it properly so he lands fully on the ledge. He then grabs the Somber Smithing Stone 7 and does a roll to both get back to running speed quickly and also avoid any potential attacks the Abductor Virgin might have thrown out. He's then going to run down through this tunnel that's littered with enemies, and at the end of it is the Royal Knight's Resolve that he's going to pick up, followed by fast traveling back to the Round Table hold. We're in combat though because of all these little fucks, so Seeker does a quit out after getting far enough past them so that he'll be able to fast travel immediately after grabbing the skill. So when used, Royal Knight's Resolve buffs the damage of your next weapon swing that lands by 80%, but on this patch, it buffs the damage of all sources, and the buff doesn't go away if you're attacking with other weapons or using things like Hoarfrost Stomp. It only goes away after around 10 seconds have passed or after you attack with the weapon you casted it with. I'm sure you can see where this is headed. At the Round Table hold, Seeker levels up his Vigor to 17 to make sure he has enough health to survive a future boss's attack, puts 1 into Strength to bring it up to 11 so he can one-hand the hatchet if he wanted, and dumps the rest into Mind so he has as much FP as possible for using Hoarfrost Stomp. He then also allots his flasks so that he has 1 that recovers health and 3 that recover FP so that he can do even more stomps. The last thing he does while he's at the hold is then run up to Smithing Master Hugh and have him upgrade his hatchet to +9, which is the second highest this weapon goes, and he also applies Royal Knight's Resolve to the Godskin Stitcher. Something awesome for the speedrun is that we don't have the required stats to wield Godskin Stitcher, which means that when we go to use Royal Knight's Resolve with it, we technically aren't wielding it properly, so casting the skill doesn't drain FP, but we still get the buff for some reason. Seeker just fast traveled back to crumbling Fair Missoula, and after running past this enemy, he's going to do a quit out to make sure he has full stamina going into a boss fight. This fight is against the Godskin duo, and Seeker's strat for it begins by touching a specific corner on a structure to hit the trigger to spawn them, then dropping back to the nearby corner of the structure to cast the Royal Knight's Resolve buff, followed by throwing out a stomp to aggro the Godskin Noble. Seeker's goal is to do at least 3,300 damage, causing the Noble to phase transition, during which Seeker reapplies the buff and continues to throw out stomps as the Noble is lowered to the floor, which takes him out pretty quickly. Seeker then uses a flask to recover some FP and reapplies the buff while standing here to block any potential fireballs from the Godskin Apostle, and then begins to throw out stomps where he can at this guy. The Apostle is weaker than the Noble, needing only 3,000 damage dealt in the phase transition, and as soon as that damage is dealt, S.i.R again reapplies the buff and takes out the Apostle while he wraps up the phase transition. The fight isn't over after killing the Apostle though, because this fight actually ends when you fully deplete the duo's shared health bar, with them being resurrected shortly after dying until that health bar is drained. S.i.R only needs to throw out a couple of stops to kill the Noble,
I think I'll
fight
climb
against the square
aboard.
root of God's forces. When S.i.R goes downstairs and outside here, he's going to hang a left and ledge, and then jump to the solid ground across from him. He takes this path to avoid an enemy that throws projectiles at you, but he still does a quit out when he lands to de-aggro the enemy, so he doesn't throw any projectiles while we're across the gap. If you're low enough on HP after the fight, one projectile is enough to kill you. When he loads back in, S.i.R runs past this dog and makes a leap to a fallen pillar. When he goes to get off the pillar, for some reason he just wasn't able to cut the corner properly and the pillar kinda pushed him off, which had never happened to S.i.R before this run. Thankfully his most recent stable ground position is on that pillar, so by doing a quick quit out, he spawns back on the pillar and is able to continue from where he left off without dying. When questioned about this, S.i.R remained adamant that this was a tactical quit out to restore stamina. So way up ahead is the next side of Grace, and when he jumps down to interact with it, he again will block to reduce the interact animation. At the site of Grace, S.i.R will level up Vigor to 30 because there's some strats for the next boss where we intentionally take damage. The rest of his runes then get dumped into Mind, bringing it up to 29 for the FP it gives. This will bring his total level up to 45, way better than being at level 8 like when we first arrived at Crumbling Fair Missoula, but still a far shot from the intended level for this area. If you ask me why S.i.R isn't leveling Dex to make our weapon stronger, it's because it doesn't increase the damage of the weapon by a lot. It's mainly the level of the weapon that matters. After leveling, he'll then jump over a railing to get to the bottom of a tower quickly, and when he lands on a ledge to break his fall, he'll attack the wall next to him, which cancels the landing animation he'd normally get, letting him get moving again sooner. When he lands on the ground, he'll go inside the tower and ride the elevator to the very, very top. On the way up, S.i.R takes the armor off his torso so that he takes a little more damage when doing the damage-taking strat in the next fight. At the top of the elevator, which is higher up than the site of Grace we were just at, S.i.R is going to run and roll past an Azula Beastman who throws out several attacks at him before jumping over the railing again to land on another ledge. This ledge is on the opposite side of the tower from the site of Grace we were at, so we couldn't have just gone straight to this ledge from the get-go since it's blocked off from there. After hugging the wall and jumping around the pillar bases to make sure he didn't fall off the ledge, S.i.R hopped over the railing and climbs up this ladder to get back on track with the intended way through the level. All this parkouring and running around from the last site of Grace to here saves around 20 seconds compared to running through the level otherwise. So S.i.R is about to come across the pathway to the next boss, which is pretty much just a huge upwards ramp. If you remember from earlier in the video, it's faster to spam jump while running up slope, so that's exactly what S.i.R does for the entirety of this walkway. Near the top of this ramp is the Draconian Tree Sentinel that's guarding the walkway to the next boss. S.i.R isn't going to fight the Sentinel, just run past it, and after he passes it and gets close to the fog gate, he's going to quit out to de-aggro it. This is because one time when doing a run, S.i.R got hit by fire breath from the Sentinel through the fog gate as he was entering the boss arena. This boss fight is against the Beast Clergyman, and when S.i.R enters the arena, right away he's going to run up to a specific line in the pattern on the floor and throw out stomps to hit the Clergyman as he runs at us. After 2 stomps, S.i.R will roll to the right to dodge an attack and then run to a specific corner in the pattern on the floor where he's in stomp range but out of range of the enemy's attack, where he'll bring the Clergyman's health down low enough to enter the next phase. S.i.R does a step back and applies the buff to his attack to start the phase and rolls towards the middle of the boss's body to dodge an attack and stomps 3 times. After then rolling to dodge another attack, we square up with the boss and throw out a stomp to kill him as we tank a bunch of damage from him. S.i.R then immediately unequipped all his armor to make sure that he dies from the damage over time that's being dealt to him for getting hit by the last attack, which times it out so that he dies right after the boss officially dies and he receives the rewards. This not only skips the waiting time leading up to a cinematic, but also respawns us, topping off our health, FP, and flasks. We also spawn at the next area of the game where we're typically transported to after the fight, Langdell Ashen Capital. This part opens with a bit of straightforward running, so while S.i.R does that, I know that this is the middle of the video and I usually do this near the end, but thank you to everyone who supports the channel on Patreon. Supporting the channel monetarily is entirely unnecessary, but you all choose to do it anyway. For as little as $1 a month, you get access to videos early, updates on what videos are in development, the ability to participate in polls to pick runs featured in future videos, and more. We recently had a poll where all the possible featured runs were suggested by patrons, so if that sounds like something you might want to participate in the future, then there's a link in the description. Again, it's entirely unnecessary, but thank you to those who do it regardless. It really means so much. So up ahead, after riding up an elevator, Seeker will jump down and hit a wall with his sword just before he lands to cancel the hard landing animation, and then he's going to run/climb up some giant tree branches. He's then going to wedge himself into a part where two branches branch out from one another and line up his character and camera so the diamond in the compass is aligned with a white line in the distance. He'll then jump, followed by holding W and A on his keyboard to move at an exact 45-degree angle. The timing on this is to press the buttons around 0.3 seconds after jumping. This puts him up a little on the branch, where he'll then be able to run upward a bit and line up his camera so that his head is in line with a black spot visual cue. While holding this angle and running forward, he'll slowly start to climb up the branch, and as soon as his head eclipses a little rectangle in the branch's texture, he jumps, which lets him fully climb up and reach the roof. When Seeker goes to jump off this roof that Midas shat on, he's again going to swing his weapon into a structure so that he gets the weapon bounce back animation to cancel the landing animation. As Seeker runs down this path, he swaps back from keyboard to controller, which from what he says is a pretty awkward switch to make while pressing W and shift on his keyboard, and after going up these two small sets of stairs, he's going to run past a site of grace and head to the right. When he runs outside, he'll go up two larger staircases and perform the last skip of the run. He's going to jump onto the railing on the right near the top, then he'll jump to the left and then turn right in midair to get past the pillar goblet torch thing. He's then going to quit out and load back in against the wall, and he has the global illumination quality setting set to low, meaning that the fog gate will load in a bit slower than normal after the quit out due to where he quit out at. This means that when he loads back into the game, Seeker is able to quickly run through the gate before it spawns, meaning he can just run through this boss arena to the final boss arena of the game, completely skipping the fight against Godfrey. In the back of the arena is a tall staircase leading to the final fog gate, and Seeker spams jump as he goes up it, which saves around 0.5 seconds compared to running up them. Also, if you want to avoid end fight visual spoilers, just look away for a bit. I'll tell you when the run's over and we're going into the unrestricted run. So right when he starts the fight, Seeker will cast the buff and run to the edge of where the gold foil textured lines on the ground sprout from, throw out 3 stomps, and dodge Radagon's 3 swings after. After the third swing, Seeker gets another stomp in, followed by dodging a charged up attack and throwing out 2 stomps before Radagon decides to do a stomp of his own, which Seeker dodges. He then applies the buff again while Radagon is in the air, and 2 stomps and Radagon lands before dodging a double swing attack. After then doing 3 stomps, Seeker is going to focus on dodging the triple slam attack that Radagon throws out here with reapplying the buff between the second and third attack. He dodges the third attack by rolling behind Radagon the instant he starts to bring his weapon down, and with just 1 more stomp, Radagon is dead. Seeker then used a flask to recover FP, summoned the Fang Imp Ashes that he started the run with, used the buff again, and used 1 more flask to recover FP before the final boss. By running to the side of the boss like Seeker does here and throwing out stomps, the boss will throw out an area of effect attack that will hopefully kill one of the imps. The imp's purpose is to break the boss, and if both die or neither die, then the boss will die. Now that the imp is dead, Seeker deals enough damage for the boss to transition to phase 2, which begins by wanting to do a big ring attack, but it only does it if it's targeting the player. By hiding on the boss's side like this though, the boss only sees the imp and stays in combat with it, meaning that it doesn't see the player and won't do the attack, meaning the boss just gets stuck and does nothing until Seeker kills it. After getting the remembrance for killing the boss, Seeker quits out to skip waiting for a cutscene, and when he loads back in, he'll run forward and interact with the figure in front of him to end the run. If you closed your eyes earlier for end fight visual spoilers, you can open them now. So something worth mentioning about the restricted run we just covered before jumping into the unrestricted run is that there's a newer glitch that was found called the chainsaw glitch. If you have a weapon with a skill that you can charge while moving and charge it while facing away from an enemy, then lock onto the enemy to pivot to face them, and during the pivot, you swap to a unique weapon and repress the weapon's skill button, your weapon pretty much turns into a chainsaw with a giant hitbox in front of it, constantly dealing damage to any enemies in the way. This happens because swapping during the pivot like that makes the game give you the first available skill in the game's internal list of skills, which happens to be the one where it's like you have a big pizza cutter. It's very difficult to perform, and S.i.R wasn't able to pull off a run with it for the video, but the current any % record by Muftay uses it, so if you'd like to check that out, it's linked in the description. Worth noting is that as of this video's upload, only 6 runners have runs on the any % leaderboard that use the chainsaw glitch, with S.i.R's personal best being tied for the fastest run that doesn't use it. Okay, now that we've covered the full any % restricted run, it's time to have a brief 10-second intermission before covering the unrestricted run, so either stand up and stretch your legs real quick, or just press L on your keyboard.
While you relax and stretch, visit our concession where you'll find something to please you. There are ice-cold drinks, delicious sandwiches, ice cream, coffee.
Alright, so for the unrestricted run, it's done on the current patch of the game since it has better performance. The black screen after creating your character is around 10 seconds shorter, which is a nice quality of life update, and since the zip glitch isn't patched. Speaking of the zip glitch, I think it's worth going over how it works before we get into the run. So zips, let's get into it. Here's the large picture overview. Zips are a glitch whereby blocking and then walking for a specific amount of frames, you're given 1 frame of extreme acceleration, sending you flying way across the map. The reason why this works is because of how the animation of you blocking overlaps with the animation of walking forward, and if your timing is correct, the animations overlap in such a way that you're given that ridiculous acceleration. So getting a bit more in depth, when you start blocking, you have to hold it for at least 129 to 135 frames. At that point, you then have to hold down the walk button for however many frames it takes to get to exactly 139 frames total. So if, for instance, you start blocking and then press the walk button 133 frames later, then you have to hold that walk button for exactly 6 frames to get to 139 frames total for the zip to occur. Because the range for how long you have to block before walking is 129 to 135 frames, that means that our range for how long we have to walk is 4 to 10 frames. Based on which of these timing combinations you use, the distance you get from a zip varies. The combo that's considered to be the standard for distance is 132 and 7 frames, while 130 and 9 frames give you the farthest zip. S.i.R's preferred timing for this is to block for 135 frames and then walk for 4 frames, which gives him a total distance of around 99%. He prefers doing this timing method because he finds it easier to hold walk for 4 frames instead of something like 7. Worth noting is that macros are banned in runs on the leaderboard, but for the sake of exhibition and not needing to grind out runs like he did for getting the record, S.i.R used a macro when doing the run in this video. Also worth noting about macros though is that they aren't 100% consistent. If you know anything about Elden Ring, you'll know that it's not the most stable game on PC and frame drops are common. These throw off the timing of macros and make it so that things aren't inputted with correct timing, so even macros aren't 100% consistent for doing zips. Another thing that affects the distance of your zip is what your equip load is. If you don't have too much equipped and have either a light or medium load, then you get the normal amount of distance from the zip. But for some reason, if you have a heavy load, then you go around 8% farther. There's also this thing called a mega zip. So this is a normal zip, with S.i.R reaching the distance of about this waypoint light beam. And this is a mega zip, with S.i.R going up to 5 to 6 times the distance. Mega zips are done by performing a zip and then inputting W again at some point in the next 14 frames, meaning you start inputting it somewhere in the range of frames 140 to 153. The later you perform the input in that range, the more distance you get, but if you do the input anywhere in the first 12 frames, then you have to hold the input for only 2 to 3 frames for it to work. If you start pressing W on frames 13 or 14 though, then the input can be held as long as you'd like to get the mega zip right away. For this run, S.i.R also uses a macro for the mega zips with a timing of 12 frames and holding that input for 3 frames. So some of you may be asking how it's possible for zips to be done and you not die from fall damage. The way fall damage works in this game is when you jump or fall off of something, a timer starts ticking, and if that timer passes a certain value before you hit the ground, then you take fall damage. The thing about the fall timer though is that it only starts ticking if you're falling below the height you started at. Many zips cause you to be ramped up into the air, fall, and land all at heights above where you started, so fall damage isn't a factor at all for any of those zips. Speaking of falling, if you zip out into an open area where you'd fall into the void and die, you typically have around a 2-second window before that happens. If, however, you swing your weapon as you're falling, that timer gets extended to around 10 seconds, which comes in handy with a skip later on. It's worth noting though that this 2-second timer only starts after you've fallen past the height that you originally started at. Like, zips tend to cause you to get launched higher than you started, and similar to the fall damage timer, the 2-second auto death timer only starts ticking when you're falling past your starting height. So getting to the run itself, Seeker chooses the Vagabond class since they start with a heavy equipment load, and he jumps straight into the run because no other starting stuff is important. When he gets moving to start the run, Seeker unequips his halberd right away as he grabs the finger and does a quit out on the door, since unequipping it brings him down to a medium load, which will give him the proper distance he needs for the first zip. To set up the zip outside, Seeker stands with his left foot on the third plank from the right and angles his camera to be facing dead west. He then performs the zip itself, with it shooting him to a spot where he falls all the way to the ground to end up in Stormvale Castle. If he had been heavy load instead of medium load, or if he had used a timing like holding walk for 5 frames instead of 4, then he'd be flung to just barely the wrong spot and die. This lands him at the very end of Stormvale Castle as if he had just beaten Godric. As Seeker runs to the next zip location, he re-equips the halberd so that he's at heavy load. Seeker considers this to be the hardest zip of the run, with runners not being too sure if this zip is just super precise or super random. He positions himself on the right side of some moss on the ground and angles his compass and character to be just left of the tree that's ahead, and this zip actually took several attempts to perform, with the macro failing 3 times before working. This zip shoots him forward into the rock, which for some reason causes him to bounce back in the opposite direction even farther than he would have gone if he hadn't hit the rock and gone just forward. This lands him where we set up the Pegasus glitch before to get to the 4 belfries, where he just unequipped the halberd again to get back to a medium load to shorten his zip length, because otherwise he'd overshoot the belfries and become rock splatter. Here at the belfry, Seeker again does the chest animation thing by hopping onto the chest as he opens it to get the imbued sword key. When he then goes to make his way to the Fair Missoula Waygate and hop down onto the ledge of a belfry, he'll do the landing animation cancel thing by hitting his sword against the wall as he lands. So when he loads in at Fair Missoula, Seeker is immediately going to perform a slightly different kind of wrong warp by using the Memory of Grace and then Alt-F4ing during the loading screen. The game will continue to load though, and as soon as it finishes, the game will close out and go through a few brief loads and menus as it does so. Remember that Memory of Grace brings you back to your last site of grace, and we haven't interacted with any in this run so far, so when we boot the game back up and load into our save, we'll be at the default position for the location we were last in, Fair Missoula. You might remember from the last run that Fair Missoula's default position is the proper starting spot for the area, and not the visitation cell that the Waygate brings us to. When he loads in, Seeker will right away hop on the railing to the right, line up his compass with a little window, and zip straight into the Lincoln balcony on the right. This zip damages him a little since his landing spot is a bit lower in elevation from where he started. He then wedges himself into a corner by a pillar and lines up the compass diamond onto the corner of a stone on the ground before zipping again, which lands him on a rotunda.